Jeffries. What it has to be less than that because the majority is not the majority of people who are voting. It's the majority of people who vote for a named candidate, right? You know
Yes.
this.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, okay, so let's say Nancy Pelosi calls their bluff. Don't vote for me. And they vote for Hakeem Jeffries. It goes into, enough of only like 4 of them vote for Hakeem Jeffries so that
I got to
there
set up
is
a couple
no
things. I'll be right
majority. They
back.
have to revote, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens? Either they have the same vote that they had before, or they switch to Pelosi, or they maybe other people vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
So
But
let's
if
yeah,
but if
let's,
5
let's
more
talk
Yes,
about
it
people,
goes to a
if
second ballot.
5
it
or
goes
10
to a second or third or fourth or
round, wait a second.
50th round of
Second
voting.
second round. Now you have 15 people who vote for Hakeem Jeffries, 215 who vote for McCarthy, and 205 who vote for Nancy Pelosi. What happens then, Virgil?
Wait. Hang on. Why would if memory serves, McCarthy
So
got
these
212 votes? So you're not saying that number goes
no,
up.
I'm
That's
suggesting
Senate. That's every Republican.
in round two,
In
one
round
of
two,
two things has to happen.
nobody can marshal a majority, so it goes to round 3.
No. You don't need you need a plurality
No,
of
no,
name
no.
That's
of
not
name.
true.
It would
That is
require
not true.
Democrats would have to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be speaker. Or
Sam,
a large number would have to abstain altogether.
yes, or abstain. Under your scenario, Sam, you need a majority of the people voting for a name,
Okay, so
which is to say not voting present, which means
not
that
voting.
if every single Democrat shows up and they vote for someone, then unless they have a majority within that caucus, I'll say it's not a majority, and this is again assuming the Republicans voted as a block and they're a minority, and no Democrat is going to vote for McCarthy, obviously, then it's just going to keep going to successive ballots.
Right.
And this is not an unprecedented situation.
Right.
It's simply a situation we've not had in 100 years.
And importantly, this
And
could go on for dozens of rounds, as it did in the historical precedent that Virgil is nodding to. And this is where we start to talk about media attention and spectacle, where Nancy Pelosi, who 3/4 of Americans want to step down, a bipartisan majority of people can't stand Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, who was down.
We got to talk about Democrats
was
because
down-
the Republicans, the Republicans are irrelevant.
Yeah, it's like half of Democrats want her. I think it's a majority of Democrats want her to step down. So the question is, isn't this part of the spectacle that we're trying to create around the issue of why 50 million people just lost their health insurance and what the government is going to do about it in this moment? So we don't end up in a situation where Joe Biden is saying, let's do more COBRA payments, let's give more giveaways to the private insurance industry. And even if it doesn't result, obviously, in Medicare for all tomorrow, what it does is finally has the best chance of forcing a conversation on this issue that I can imagine happening at all. So unless we give an alternative of how we're going to force
the subsequent things that
moment.
followed that vote probably would have sucked up a lot of that attention.
Yeah,
now you didn't know that, of course. You didn't know that, of course, before the force the vote. But presumably, over those days, you would have probably still paid more attention to the insurrection in the Capitol.
Right.
Now you don't know that because you don't know how things are going to play out. And
they could have scheduled the vote. They could have scheduled the hearings for any time also.
Well, I'm saying the spectacle that would have come from that vote on the 4th would have been would have ended, of course, on the 6th. And
sure, but again, we didn't know that at the time. We couldn't know that at all.
No, of course. I mean, and then you also would have held up the vote for I guess to certify the vote, right? I mean, how would you do that?
Wait, sorry, your question is, how do we certify the vote because there was a job that we didn't know was going to happen?
No. I'm saying in terms of we haven't organized, we don't have the Speaker of the House yet at that point. But my point is like the assuredness that the force of the vote people had enough so that the Progressive Caucus members who didn't do what they said were sellouts. To me, I'm sorry. I just think that's ludicrous.
Okay, so
like
let me ask you this.
I never even criticized the force the vote until it became apparent to me it was part of Jimmy's sort of project to attack the Democrats and particularly the progressives. I mean, he did that when she was elected before she even won the general election. He attacked AOC for endorsing Andrew Cuomo in the general election. I mean, and then I realized I'd been duped.
My name's Brianna, and regardless, Jimmy Dore could go and kill 15.
You brought up the DSA, you brought up nurses, you brought up the media, you brought up David Sirota.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get this sentence out, we can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in force the vote. So there are ways that I think we can talk about the effect of Jimmy Dore's argumentative style on this discourse.
Well, it's not an argumentative style.
Okay.
I don't mind his style. I think that when you put out and make the argument over and over again that she's a sellout and they're a fraud, I think that does damage.
We can and we should talk about that, but that's different than making an argument for why force the vote is good or bad. And
if you're asking why I didn't support it, that's why. Because I didn't want to associate myself with a attack.
So that's honest. That's honest. So you're not saying that you actually think that force the vote was an effective strategy or a bad idea. You didn't like that it was associated with Jimmy Dore.
I thought, like I've said this 3 times on this, and I thought it was a middling idea. When I found out that they were leveraging other stuff that I thought had more material benefit and not
but it doesn't have more material benefit. Because they could have asked at least for you to get rid of all
you and I have a disagreement. I believe that exempting PAYGO.
But they didn't exempt PAYGO.
Excuse me. At a time where we desperately need funding, we need expansion on all sorts of things, ranging from expanded unemployment insurance. We need checks. All of that. I think that was a valuable get.
It was valuable, but it wasn't a get.
Huh?
It was valuable, but it wasn't a get. You have no knowledge if their failure to force the vote resulted in getting those things, if those things were already planned concessions or not. Moreover, part of my demand was to get rid of PAYGO entirely. So if we're talking about the material value of either of those things,
yes, your demand was you. Look, I'm saying there is an argument, okay, but neither one of us knows how much you could have leveraged at this point.
Well, here's
you want to argue that you think that their negotiations, that their ask wasn't big enough. Fine, I don't have a big.
That is what I'm arguing. Here's why.
But as to why I wanted to distance myself as fast as I could, because I'm not going to be part of a project that disempowers for what I think is a highly speculative tactic that I think is dubious, frankly. But again, I was perfectly willing to just let 1,000 flowers bloom. Like you said, there was no strategy on my part to go like, I'm going to support this so that Bree signs on to it, for instance, and then I'm going to pull the rug out. No, it was and to say that Jimmy's not associated with force the vote.
I didn't say that Jimmy's not associated with force the vote.
To say that he wasn't the biggest advocate or the person most close to
associated. Very central to it. It was his idea.
That is why when he started to use it as a leverage to disempower the progressives in Congress, I decided I'm done.
So I'd like to address that point, if I may. I don't believe that Jimmy is trying to disempower the progressives in Congress. What I believe Jimmy is doing, whether or not you agree with him or the tactic he's using, is trying to use his platform to pressure the elected officials, the progressives that we have worked so hard and have this unprecedented number, to your point, in Congress, to do the thing that we want them to do, which is to use power when it falls in their lap. Now, in this instance, we didn't need to get a majority of progressives in Congress to enact the plan. That was the whole spark and magic of it. That with a very small number of people.
Well, let's take that first premise, though. Take the first premise that you made, the assertion that you don't think Jimmy's agenda is to disempower progressives.
Sam, I'm sorry. Which way is this going to go? I feel like I'm in the middle of a point. I feel like I've been letting you.
Okay, go.
If I could just finish this point. I have like a whole notepad of notes that I'm trying to catch up on from the various issues that you brought up that I think are important to address. Jimmy's perspective, I don't want to speak for him, but it seems obvious to me what he's doing is to be the farthest, angriest version of the left, to create political pressure on progressives to do what they said they were going to do when they ran for office. One of those, AOC in particular, since she's come under focus, said that she wanted to oust Pelosi. She complained just this past January, a year ago now, that it was regrettable that the Democratic Party was so moderate, so to the right, that we couldn't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. That's almost a direct quote. So what Jimmy's trying to do is say, I don't care about AOC per se. I don't care about the squad per se. I'm invested in these individuals in so far as that they're advancing the interests of the progressive movement and are fighting tooth and nail for the policies that caused us to support them in the first place. And he is willing to become the antagonist in that by being the most ferocious attack dog to push them where they need to go. If AOC were to say, hey, this is my plan for Medicare for all, and demonstrate a fighting spirit, there's no one in this world, I think, who would imagine that Jimmy Dore would just randomly keep antagonizing her for no reason. No, doesn't have a vendetta out against AOC. Whether or not I think that his approach is most useful is a different question. But he doesn't have a vendetta out against AOC because he hates her or something. It's because he simply wants her to conform with her own campaign promises. So I want to put to you, Sam, what is the point of having these people in Congress if when they have real power to leverage, they decline to do it?
I disagree with your assessment of how much power they had in this instance.
We do disagree that they could have held up the vote for Nancy Pelosi and ensured that she didn't get seated if they wanted to, given the way the voting structure that we just talked about.
They could have gotten rid of Nancy Pelosi by voting for McCarthy.
Well, sure, but they also could have gotten rid of.
Do you think they should have done that? Would you? Let me ask you this.
No, obviously not. So, do you think they should have done it by voting for Barbara Lee? Well, and holding up the votes until there was a
what?
Until they get enough.
Do you think that the Democrats? Do you think the Democrats do you think the Democrats in Congress, and do you think the Democrats in the general population, if let's say AOC and Tlaib and Omar and I don't know, Bowman and one or two others, Cori Bush, if they were preventing Nancy Pelosi from becoming Speaker of the House, where do you think public opinion would fall on this?
With them, because 3/4 of Americans revile Nancy Pelosi. That's the whole point.
You think that Democrats would do that?
No, I think
you and I have a different assessment of what would happen in that scenario.
MSNBC and CNN and mainstream Democrats are going to very much side with Nancy Pelosi. I think the American public is going to aggressively side with the squad. I'm sorry?
How many mainstream Democrats do you think there are in this country?
What do you mean? The mainstream Democrats don't like Nancy Pelosi. I'm talking about pundits. I'm talking about people on TV.
Pundits, but I'm talking about when you talk about public opinion, you're saying that all the major vehicles to shape public opinion are going to be against those five who prevent Nancy Pelosi from being Speaker of the House.
Right, but it won't matter. It will redound negatively against them, just like it did, by the way, when the mainstream media lined up against Donald Trump, who still somehow managed to win in 2016. Here's the thing. The media can influence public opinion, but at a certain point, even they have to conform if they don't want to lose their audience. So this is a gambit.
You and I have a disagreement on what would happen in that scenario.
And we do. Your feeling is that the public at large is going to say, oh, I hated Nancy Pelosi before, but now we're going to all side with her and against this enormously popular group of young black and brown
people. The public at large is going to be so tired of conflict at that point that the idea that they're going to rally around AOC and Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush because they're preventing Nancy Pelosi from seating, I think that's fantastical.
Okay, well, we have a very, very different.
We have a disagreement on that.
Of what it means for 75% of people.
But since you started that with what Jimmy Dore's intentions are, okay, I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is that AOC, as a freshman Congress person, her strength comes from the fact that she is one of the biggest fundraisers in Congress. She does it all from small donations.
From us. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, I don't know what Jimmy Dore's intentions are. Maybe you do. I have watched Jimmy Dore.
Go ahead and look at my old video.
Years now, and I
Go ahead and look
and
at
I
my
do
old video
remember
of
when
her
he attacked AOC
income.
as a sellout
It is not all small
in
money.
the general election,
Nope.
supporting Andrew Cuomo. I don't know what motivates him, but I can tell you what the impact was. And the impact is that, Fraud Squad went out there, and when AOC did not get that seat on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a crucial committee if you want to talk about Medicare for all,
Absolutely.
there was no pushback whatsoever. There was no, and so we didn't have her back there. And in other words, basically,
why didn't we have her back there, Sam?
they were able to disempower us by not giving us a voice on that committee,
No.
and they got no pushback from it.
AOC, the fact that AOC is reliant on her base for her power is a reason why AOC should listen to her base and not Nancy Pelosi. You have it backwards.
I'm not convinced that the base is so big. You have 41,000 people who signed that petition.
Well, which is it, Sam?
There was 100 people out there.
You can't have it both ways. Is it that Force the Vote made it so that no one had AOC's back when she was denied the energy and commerce position? Or is it that AOC's base is still with her and Jimmy Dore's base
the far sexier story for the media was about, the fraud squad hashtag.
First of all, the media barely covered that to begin with. The lefty media was interested, the internet was interested, but as with most things, it takes a big splash. It takes AOC herself to draw attention to the issue, which, by the way, the only reason, I want to be clear about this, the only reason we're talking about AOC and why she's such a focus of this is because she inserted herself into this conversation in the thread with Justin Jackson. So I think there's been a lot of bad faith discourse about the focus on AOC. I do think there is now at this point some undue focus on her. It's all of them together. And I think that she's taking the heat for the inaction of a lot of other squad members who should also be in focus right now, and people who are progressives but not in the squad. But
right now we should be rallying about getting Katie Porter a waiver so that she can sit on the Financial Services Committee.
That could have been one of the demands if they had decided to force the vote. They could have actually demanded specific committee positions, but they gave them their power.
That would have been a better thing to ask for. I don't know.
Well, Sam, I don't know what you were asking for.
He's too bicker for a while, so we're going to move on here in a second.
Explicitly said that we were going to ask for committee seats.
That same thing that you were part of was basically saying fraud squad, and I wanted nothing to do with that.
Sam, the fraud squad hashtag didn't even emerge until after the vote came out. So I'm not really sure.
I'm sorry. Listen.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's the only time I came out publicly, the first time I came out publicly with any negativity associated with that was when Jimmy Dore did that video. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I know the fraud squad trended the day of the vote.
In terms of his agenda, one of the things that came out on that Slack, as you know, was that there was a lot of people.
I don't know anything about anything. I'm not a part of the Slack. The Slack I'm a part of is the DSA Slack, which I logged into, and I had a bunch of people making fun of me as well. But I didn't use that to condemn the entire DSA.
I want to know what the video. I would like to know what the video is and what Sam has to say.
On the Slack channel, apparently somebody leaked some things, and there was a lot of people on there who were saying this is important for the movement for a People's Party to show that to make it out as if the progressives in the Democratic caucus are useless, and there is no reason for a progressive party, for a People's Party, if they're effective. And I'm
not true. What the Slack said was,
you didn't see the Slack.
No, I saw the clip. I don't have firsthand knowledge of the Slack because I'm not in the Slack. So when you said, as you well know, I thought you were implying that I was a part of that Slack conversation.
No, I'm not part of the Slack either. I just saw those.
Well, pardon me, but the screen grab that was circulated by Ryan Grimm on Twitter said that if the squad doesn't do this, if the squad doesn't use their power, it's a demonstration of why we need third parties. And we can use this moment to demonstrate why we need an outside pressure from someone like the People's Party, because people who are a part of the Democratic Party are obviously unwilling or unable to flex the kind of muscle that we need to move the progressive movement forward. Now, you can frame that as, I'm trying to kill the squad so that we can get FP.
Well, I think that's very consistent with what Jimmy's been doing. He's been pushing for a third party for the past 6 years. And so, first it was the Green Party, and then it was, and frankly, I remember what Jimmy's prescription was. People can go and look at the debate that I had with Jimmy Dore in 2016, where he told me that Donald Trump was going to get nothing done and it would bring us Elizabeth Warren. That was his argument. Plus, he didn't know what a filibuster was. And if we're talking about, I mean, you made some assertions about what Jimmy's intentions are. This is my understanding of Jimmy's intentions are in this context. And frankly, honestly, I felt like I got completely duped and did not when I actually was, took Jimmy's first video and proposal for this. I was far more, I was naive about thinking that like, oh, well, I should have known. And I have to say that like, I felt deep regret about that because I was duped. And I realized, and I don't know that he wasn't trying to dupe people. I think it's just in his nature. And it turned into something that became extremely corrosive as far as I'm concerned. And it undercut what little power I think progressives have in the Democratic Party.
So you agree that progressives had the power to hold up the vote?
Yeah, everybody had the power to hold up the vote.
So do you think that do you also agree?
Gotta move on from that shit. It's a good look back. I've never seen that before. I literally just have heard about it a little bit and completely forgot about it. Put it on my thing a long time ago saying we need to watch it. And now, yeah. It's good to remember who the good sources are in the world. And Sam Cedar is not a good actor. Being in Hollywood or being well-intentioned for our best humankind forward directions. He's a fucking millionaire Hollywood dickhead, whatever. Let's move on. I want to move on to Eva Bartlett. I don't know if you all know, I think Eva Bartlett, I've mentioned her name before, but haven't really shown her a lot. I do have my favorite clip ever from her. She is my favorite clip of anything ever. It's fantastic. And then
very informative. Thank you.
I do have a video of why she moved to Russia, and then I have a video of her interview in Russia. She has clips now. She was a fantastic person, boots on the ground, actual activist, actual journalist, anti-war journalist, and she is fantastic. She does not come to opinions with me 100%. She is a libertarian. I am a progressive. AKA far left, far right, can agree on things, but we don't always necessarily agree on everything. But when it comes to facts, she's a fantastic journalist. So, we're going to check her storyline out. First, we're going to start out with my favorite clip ever from her. She is my favorite. She has the greatest clip in news history for myself. And then we'll move on to why she moved to Russia. Where Edward Snowden's at too, guys. Remember that. He had to leave America.
Very much. Now we are open to questions, if there are questions. The gentleman in the back.
Thank you very much. I'm Christopher Ronneberg with the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. A question or two questions for Ms. Bartlett here. As a journalist, I'm sure you can appreciate getting other impressions than empirical impressions from the ground. When you talk about the Syrian people and what the Syrian people want, how can you quantify that? Do you have any independent surveys where you can actually document that? And secondly, you talk about the corporate media, the Western media, the lies, and all of this. Could you explain what you think might be the agenda from us in the Western media, and why we should lie, why the international organizations on the ground should lie, why we shouldn't believe all these absolutely documentable facts that we see from the ground, these hospitals being bombed, these civilians who are talking about the atrocities that they have been experiencing.
She just nodded.
How can you justify calling all of us liars?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, there are certainly honest journalists amongst the very compromised establishment media. Let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah,
Come at
okay,
me, bro.
I'll tell you, there are none.
Yep, none.
There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing in the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change. How can the New York Times, I was reading it this morning, or how can Democracy Now!, which I was reading the other day, maintain until this day that this is a civil war in Syria? How can they maintain until this day that that the protests were unarmed and nonviolent until, say, 2012? That is absolutely not true. How can they maintain that the Syrian government is attacking civilians in Aleppo when every person that's coming out of these areas occupied by terrorists is saying the opposite? So that's with regards to your question on lying Western media. How do I quantify the support of the Syrian people? The elections. In 2014, the Syrian people held elections. The voter turnout was 88%, including people in Lebanon, where I was during the elections in Lebanon, which were actually ran for 2 days, extended hours, people walking for kilometers to reach the embassy, including people who flew from their own countries like mine, which has criminally shut the Syrian embassy so that Syrian people have no rights, and including people within Syria who braved a torrent of terrorist mortars and missiles on election day. And yet, voter turnout rate was something like 88%, I believe. And then the election, the results were 78, I believe. I think
Tim Anderson gives you the opposite.
Okay, I might get the turnout wrong. So the results. 74 participate, 88. Okay. Anyway, the point being, overwhelmingly, the people support President Assad. That's based on elections, based on my own travels. Okay, so that's subjective. But as I said, I've traveled around Syria, talked with people of all faiths, all walks of life, and there are people that want change in the government. We're not pretending they don't want change. Everybody wants change. But in terms of support of the government, the point is they don't see President Assad as the problem. They see the problem as terrorism. They see elements of problems in the system that they have there. But President Assad, they don't see as the problem. They actually overwhelmingly support him. So I'm basing it on their choice in their leader, and I'm basing it on my interactions with people in Syria and Lebanon.
Hi everyone, my name is Stan. Welcome to my channel. Today
that was my favorite clip ever of Eva Bartlett. Now we're going to go to an interview with her and why she moved to Russia.
About 3 years old, so I grew up in Canada and was never terribly political. I was from an arts family. My family were musicians. I studied music at university, French as a minor, was never political until my late 20s, and then I discovered the issue of Palestine, which I knew nothing about, and I started researching and decided to go there and witness for myself what life was like under occupation, and fell into activism and eventually started writing as a journalist. I lived in Palestine for 4 years, 8 months in the West Bank, 3 years in Gaza, and then then I started going to Syria to write about the West's war on Syria and what was really happening there. And since then, I've gotten involved in different issues like going to the Donbass, going to Crimea, seeing what people in Crimea had to say about what the West was saying versus the reality in Crimea.
Was it your childhood dream to become a journalist, or?
Not at all. I wanted to be a marine biologist, but it turned out I wasn't very good at science. So that's why I ended up studying music at university, because I already played piano. And journalism was just something I fell into. You're probably very aware that when you travel, it's one of the best forms of education. And I'd done quite a bit of independent traveling during and after university. And it was after that that I started really starting to want to know more about the world and want to know news. And in listening to certain news, then I found out about issues like Palestine. And then going to a place like Palestine and seeing how people are really living and how the media is portraying what's happening made me want to start writing and telling what I viewed as the truth.
Which countries have you been to after university before going to Palestine and living there?
Oh, it's a hard one. It's a long list. So I've done quite a bit of traveling for the pleasure of traveling, which included, well, I lived in South Korea for 2 years teaching English. And during that time, I traveled extensively in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and then in China. And otherwise, I've traveled after Palestine. I've been to Venezuela, Tunisia, well, of course, much of Europe. And I came, well, we'll get into Russia later, I suppose. But yeah, many other countries I'm probably forgetting.
Regarding Palestine, is there anything that you can tell about how people actually live there compared to what is portrayed in Western media?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest thing I could say is Palestinians are either deliberately omitted from Western media, or if they're mentioned, they're all collectively portrayed as terrorists. But these are people that were living in their land, and then people from outside of Palestine came in and occupied their land, much like happened in Canada. And since then, there's been a slow genocide of Palestinians, but the way the media reports it is simply Israel's defending itself. And having lived in Gaza and worked with farmers who come under live Israeli fire, and I myself came under live Israeli fire, I can say without a doubt, this is not a case of Israel defending itself. This is a case of a continued colonization of the land, and the media is simply covering up the brutal reality that Palestinians are enduring every day. Even just going to the West Bank, it's not as, people might not think it's as dramatic as Gaza, because Gaza is a place that Israel drops bombs on whenever it feels like, and wages an all-out war every so many years. But in the West Bank, there's daily violence from the Israeli soldiers, from the Israeli illegal colonists. And I think one of the things that really struck me about Palestinians was, in spite of all the aggression, the violence they face on a daily basis.
So part of the reason I wanted to go over Eva was because I'm going to use her as a reference for this rest of the Ukraine-Russia events. And I want you to see, do you think she's credible? I think she's a credible source. Again, I completely believe her reporting. Her opinions might differ with mine, but her reporting and her facts are dead on. So that's why we're going over her history. So we're going over her history so you can see why I agree with her, or I follow her.
Learn about in the media.
Regarding Russia, I mean, have you been here before you chose to move here, or?
Yes, I came here 2 years ago. I thought it was high time that I come to Russia, given that I've been called a Kremlin stooge and a Russian propagandist for years because of my reporting on Syria. But also because I knew from other friends that Russia is a beautiful country, so I thought, well, I love traveling, I'd love to see Russia. So in August 2019, I came here and I spent 2 months in Russia, and I had very good encounters and experiences. And so that was one of the reasons that I decided this year to move here.
Okay, and at the time, where were you living when you visited Russia?
I was living in Kitchener, Ontario, which you might be familiar with. It's not the most beautiful of cities, but I was living there and I was going back and forth from Syria and Canada and some other places. But I was all the while thinking I want to live somewhere in the east. I was not sure where yet, but so Russia became a contender at that point.
Did you have any problems with the Canadian authorities, considering you were living in Syria and then you were living in Palestine? Or was it smooth sailing and no questions asked when you were coming back?
Surprisingly, no questions asked. My theory is that obviously they know my name and my position, but perhaps they feel like it's not worth stirring up a hornet's nest. And because they know if they follow my social media, they know if they come at me with accusations, I'm just going to put it on social media, as I've done with BBC and other journalists that come at me with accusatory questions. So I feel like maybe I haven't been bothered because they feel it's not worth their effort, I think.
What was the worst thing you've ever been accused of? I'm curious.
Oh, there's so many accusations.
You can pinpoint maybe one or two, or, I don't know. If you're comfortable with it.
Not that I'm not comfortable. I'm just trying to think what the worst is. Because look, I don't mind being called a conspiracy theorist. I get that all the time, and it's a meaningless accusation. It's a CIA-derived term, right, or at least a CIA-enhanced term meant to quash dissent. And I don't mind being called a liar or a propagandist for Russia, a propagandist for Assad, because in my heart I know I'm telling the truth. so there's no one worse. I've been called so many things. They all kind of merge together. But the bottom line is I know that I'm always telling the truth as much as I can.
And before moving to Russia, I mean, what kind of, what did you think about this place? What did you think about the people? What kind of misconceptions did you have? If you had any at all?
Okay, it's not that I had some misconceptions, but I didn't realize, okay, I knew Russia was a vast country, but I didn't realize how many languages and ethnicities and cultures there are in Russia. I have to admit great naivety on my part there. It wasn't until I went to Crimea and met with Yuri Gempel, he's in Simferopol, and I'm forgetting his position, so I'm sorry for that. But anyway, he was talking about the diversity of Russia, and I was flabbergasted. I just had no idea it was so diverse. So I guess that would be my only surprise. But I didn't believe the common stereotypes about Russia because I had read enough to know that probably wasn't true. I think one thing that did surprise me in talking with friends that live in St. Petersburg, they're Americans, but they've been living there for 10, 15 years, is the diversity of Russian education. I mean, I knew Russian education was good, but they were saying, for example, if you study one craft or one trade, you still learn poetry and about ballet and arts and everything, even if you're studying to be a mechanic or something like that. So I thought that was very interesting because in Canada, of course, you don't get that diversity.
Okay, so here you are, you're in Kitchener, Ontario. You're thinking, all right, I kind of want to see Russia, I kind of want to move. Was there anything in particular that really forced you to make that decision, or did you just say, you know what, why not? Let's just go and see how it is?
I've been nomadic most of my adult life, living around the world, sometimes for a year or two. In the past 7, 8 years, I've been going back and forth from Canada to Syria and other countries. So it's been a very unstable life, and I started really longing for stability. But the other thing is, I started to grow, and I love Canada for certain reasons, but I started to realize I don't really identify with Canadian culture anymore. The things that I prioritize, the issues that I'm very concerned about, when I would return home, I found that most people I talked to were apathetic about it. And I started to not really identify with Canadian values, and I found here in Russia, I'm still learning, of course, but there's more a priority on family values, and that it's less so in Canada. Not gone completely, but I think there's so much propaganda in the West that many of us who are living there aren't aware of because it's just insidious and it's all the time in our faces. But I became aware of it because I was living outside of Canada, and I would return and think, this is what we're talking about now? So it was building up. It wasn't a snap moment. It was building up over the years. But then last year, I left Canada to go to the UK to participate in a panel and then go on to Syria. And then all this COVID happened, and since then I haven't been back. So I saw what was happening in Canada. It's particularly in Ontario, it's been very draconian, the response to COVID, and unnecessarily so, I have to say. And I started just thinking, thank goodness I'm in Syria. And then I spent time in Serbia and thinking, thank goodness I'm in Serbia. And then I just decided, you know what, I'm going to try to move to Russia because
days before the
Right, all these freaking buttons now. So that was Eva Bartlett, and just a little warm up into her. I don't think I've shown her much, maybe except for my favorite clip, because I love my favorite clip. She owns that guy so freaking hard. It's great. But let's check her out now today. This was from one day ago, I believe, and I have to mute myself again, go back over, but this is one day ago. We'll get into it a little bit and see if we can get a discussion going. Again, from Moscow, Canadian reporter, independent journalist, no connections to any government. What she says is what she believes.
What the Russians call special operation, what the West calls a war and invasion, what the Russians call a special operation, days before the shelling reached dangerous levels. And this is not according to Russians, this is according to the OSCE. Mm-hmm. And they said that most of the shelling, 80% of the shelling, was coming from the East, from the West, from the military that had around 80 to 100,000 troops right on the conflict line with Donbass and Lugansk. Yeah. Putin says they were ready to invade. They were ready for a blitzkrieg. We have evidence, we have documents that in March, they were going to make their move. But even then, the most interesting part about Putin's revelations is that he says, even when we started our military operation, we told the Ukraine government in Kiev, have those troops that are on the contact line retreat, and we'll stop. Have them retreat, push them back. You want to know what they did? They pushed forward.
So I'm really happy to be speaking with you today, Alex Christoforou. Did I pronounce that correctly, by the way? Oh, excellent.
Correct. Very good.
Well, so I know of your work with the Duran for years, but I would like to ask you just to maybe introduce yourself a bit more, and also the origins of the Duran. And I should note, I meant to say, I'm very grateful for the work you've been doing for many years.
Well, thank you. It's great to finally speak with you. I've been following your work as well, very closely, as has Alexander, the other part of the Duran as well, Alexander Mercouris. And we have the channel, the Duran, on various platforms, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, Super U, as well as a really active group on Locals, the Duran.locals.com, as well as Patreon and Subscribestar. So we're on a lot of platforms, as you have to be nowadays, given all the censorship. But we have the Duran channel. Alexander Mercouris has his channel as well. And I have my channel, but it's all under the umbrella of the Duran. And so we just try to get as much news out to our subscribers as possible. And that's what we do. We cover geopolitics, and we just try to cover it in an honest and truthful manner to the best of our ability.
Yeah,
that's what we do every day.
Well, I've been tuning in quite a bit lately, and I have to say, your analysis and coverage of events in Ukraine has been very level-headed and very insightful, and I would say like a nice antidote to the hysteric kind of stuff coming out of Western corporate media. But also, I don't think you could really be accused of being, a Putin propagandist or any of the things that's normally slung at people who stray from the Western narrative, because you really are incredibly balanced, in my opinion. So I think it's worthwhile people to be listening to your analysis and commentary.
Well, unfortunately, they do label us. A lot of people label us as Putin propagandists. I mean, I'm sure you're used to the labels that get thrown at you because you try to present stuff in an honest and truthful way.
Right.
And when you do that and you go against the mainstream narrative, which oftentimes is not truthful and is not honest, you get labeled with these things. You're a Trump apologist, you're a Putin apologist, you're an Assad apologist, whatever you hear over, depending on the context.
Critical thinking. You're supposed to question everything. So question everything.
Try to analyze what's going
on and always think that the government is lying to you is the rule of journalism. It should be, at least.
A lot in reality and in real politic. And people may not like what they hear. They may not feel good with what they hear. Maybe they're on the other side of things. They have a different view of things, but it doesn't change the reality of what's happening or what's going on. And we have to present that reality. Unfortunately, though, in the case of Ukraine right now, we are being labeled as Putin apologists, or you're paid by the Kremlin, or all kinds of nonsense. But no one ever argues the points or the facts. Right. They just throw these labels at you. They never argue the points that you're making or try to counter what you're making. It's just, oh, you're a Putin apologist, and that's that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we're in this mess. The world. That's one of the reasons we're in this mess.
Well, no, I definitely understand what it's like to be labeled with all sorts of smears, and I think probably you and Alexander have reached the same point, perhaps long ago. Like, it doesn't matter, what people say, because you're still going to say your mind, right? And for me, it's the same thing. Whatever platform, even if my only platform is my own blog, I'm still going to be saying the same thing. Nobody's influencing me except insightful commentary and analysis that provokes me to think, or what I hear on the ground in a given location. But in terms of being dictated to what to say, no. So I think it is an important point for people who are listening who might not be aware of just how much slander you are taking, and how it really, like you said, it doesn't present any argument. It's just meant to tar your reputation and cause people just not to listen, period, to what you have to say. So that said, I think let's just start with, how would you present what is happening in Ukraine, what's been happening the last 3 weeks, but of course with more context than just late February 2022. How would you present that to your average Western consumer of Western corporate media, who is getting this narrative that out of the blue, Russia is invading its neighbor, the democratic nation of Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I think that you kind of hinted at what's going on. And I know that you're very well aware of the situation and the history of the situation. And I think that's one of the big problems with what you're getting from the mainstream media. If you're just following the collective West, and I use the word collective West because it's a way to categorize the European Union, the states of Europe, say Canada, the United States, Australia, maybe New Zealand. These countries are now aligned against Russia and in support of Ukraine. The narrative is that all of a sudden Putin, this madman, this man that wants to recreate the Soviet Union, decided for crazy reasons, because he's a dictator, he's the next Austrian painter, we can say the word. He's this next supervillain. He decided to invade Ukraine. There's no context. There's no reasoning. It's just the usual. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union, and he's hungry for power. And pretty soon he'll be marching all the way to Portugal. And that's the narrative that you get. And this happened all of a sudden. It's a war that's only been taking place for 3 weeks, and that's that. And everyone has to support the democratic country of Ukraine and fight back against the evil, authoritarian, tyrannical dictator, the most evil man in the world, which is Putin. He's now the most evil man in the world. Before it was Assad, and then it was Gaddafi, and then it was Saddam. And okay, so now he's the most recent man to be dubbed the most evil man in the world, right? Okay, that's the collective West narrative. If people want to believe it, that's fine. I'm not saying don't believe it, but that's the narrative that you're getting. This happened all of a sudden for these reasons. If you look at it from the Russian side of things, this is a conflict that has been going on for decades with regards to NATO and NATO expansion, going back to Putin's speech in Munich at the Munich Security Conference, I believe it was 2007 or 2008, where he told the West, do not expand any further. This is a problem for us. Ukraine, Georgia, all these countries must not get into NATO. It is a security risk for us. And we want, as Russia, we want security guarantees. It's not asking for much as a great power, at a minimum, as a great regional power, because once again, in the West, you get the narrative that Russia is just a gas station masquerading as a country. And they use, these terms as well, which is very degrading, because Russia is much, much more than a gas station. If you look at the economics of Russia, and people are going to find out.
They also build weapons, tons and tons of weapons, massive amounts of weapons.
The sanctions.
Come on, man.
A lot of people, unfortunately, are going to learn that it's much more than just a gas station. But you get that narrative over and over again. But as a great regional power and a great power in the world, it's proper and right to think about a collective security guarantee for Europe and a security guarantee for Russia, as it is logical and correct to think about this for the United States and for China, etc. India. These are big, great powers. You fast forward to 2014, and that's where you had the coup. And it was a coup. It was a coup. It was initiated by the Obama White House. It was initiated by Vice President Joe Biden. It was initiated by Victoria Nuland. You had Jeffrey Pyatt, the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine, and you had John McCain, a U.S. senator, flying into the Maidan Square to egg the people on in this revolution of dignity is what they called it. But it was a coup. It was a coup d'etat. I'm not saying there were not problems in Ukraine. Ukraine's had problems since it was since the Soviet Union dissolved. It's had problems, and it hasn't been able to overcome those problems. Whether there are problems with the leadership, whether it's corruption, you name it, it has not been able to stand on solid footing. And in 2014, it all crumbled. I remember you had the Sochi Olympics, so Russia was distracted as to what's going on. They kind of got caught flat-footed. And the Obama White House, with the help of the European Union, they removed the internationally recognized, democratically elected Yanukovych. Now, I'm not saying Yanukovych was a good president. I'm not saying he wasn't corrupt. Many people say he was. I don't know. He probably was. Was he a good or bad president? Maybe to some people in the West, he was a bad president. Maybe to people who voted for him in the East, he was a good president. It doesn't matter, though. He was democratically elected. And when they removed him from office, you ended up with...
the point is that we shouldn't be choosing presidents. We shouldn't be taking them out. We shouldn't be doing coups. Our CIA should leave fucking democratically elected people out of it.
Moving into to fill the power vacuum. And Yatsenyuk was the guy that Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt, in their telephone call that was leaked to the world, they were the guy that they installed to head up this interim government. Then you came with Petro Poroshenko, the oligarch, chocolate king billionaire, who then came in. And then you had Joe Biden telling Poroshenko to start a war in the East, in the Donbass. This is after Crimea ascended into the Russian Federation. And this leads us to where we are today. This has been an 8-year conflict. And a lot of people get Crimea wrong. Crimea was not annexed by the Russian Federation. Russia did not invade Crimea. They didn't need to invade Crimea because they already had troops there. And all the troops did is that they just safeguarded the area so that people could exercise their democratic right to vote for their future, because these people were part of Ukraine. Then they saw the government overthrown by hostile foreign forces, and they said, you know what? We don't like this. We don't like this. They saw laws being passed right away, like you can't speak Russian, which was one of the first things that this puppet government did. And they opted to become part of Russia. And the Russian military, which was already in Crimea, provided the safeguards for those people to exercise their democratic rights. And they voted to become part of Russia. And it wasn't a rigged vote. It wasn't manipulated. There was none of that stuff going on. These people they feel Russian. They want to be part of Russian. They speak Russian, and they decided to be part of Russia. The Donbass, unfortunately, was not afforded that ability, and Russia said they would not accept a referendum to assent into the Russian Federation, even though the Donbass wanted it and did it, but Russia wouldn't accept it. I mean, it takes two to tango, and Russia has to accept your accession into the Federation as well. They accepted Crimea. As for Donbass, Russia always worked within the Minsk Accords, which were never followed over 8 years. It brings us to where we are today. So long story short, the West sees this as a 3-week conflict. Russia sees this at a minimum as an 8-year conflict.
And just to touch on what you said about the Minsk Accords and how they were never followed, please detail by whom were they never followed?
You know, they weren't followed by Ukraine.
Right.
Why were they not followed by Ukraine? Because the US was not allowing Ukraine to follow the Minsk Accords. And even worse, Angela Merkel and the French at that time.
Can't even find my stream on YouTube on my fucking TV.
The US was putting pressure.
If you talk
on
about
the
this
Germans
shit,
and the
censorship
French
is real, guys.
Fucking
share this shit out.
Because
if you're watching it later, let people know. Show them Eva Bartlett. Don't need to show me. Show them Eva.
Germany and France were guarantors of the Minsk Accords. In other words, they had to make sure that Donbass and Ukraine followed through. And Ukraine would not follow through. And no one put pressure on Ukraine to follow through. Actually, the exact reverse. They were egging Ukraine on to say, we're going to join NATO. We're going to become part of the EU. We're going to join NATO. Give us weapons. Give us artillery. Give us missiles. And this went on for 8 years. And Russia kept on complaining time and time and time again about not fulfilling the Minsk Accords. And the Minsk Accords is not a complicated document. It's like a 2-page document. But they would not follow through on it. And they kept on shelling the Donbass. They kept on attacking the Donbass. I mean, 3 weeks, the West is saying this war started in 3 weeks, but Russia is saying we're finishing a war that started in 2015 and has cost the lives of 14 to 20,000 civilians in the Donbass. People never mention the people in the Donbass. It's like they have no agency. They don't exist.
Or if they are mentioned in Western corporate media, they're mentioned as just as separatist or some other kind of derogatory term. The civilians, why they're resisting, that's not mentioned at all.
Children, families, women, people were killed.
Yep.
Upwards of 20,000, 14 to 20,000. It's terrible what's been happening in Donbass.
And if I may, I went there just for under 3 weeks in 2019, in September 2019. And I did go to 3 or 4 villages that were 400, 500 meters from Ukrainian forces that were being shelled by, including with heavy weaponry prohibited by the Minsk Accords on a nightly basis, also sometimes during the day, but they said it happens more during the night because the observers are gone and Ukraine can unleash hell upon them, and they do. And one woman, head of administration, I think her position was in Zaitsevo, a village north of Gorlevka, which is north of Donetsk. She was saying, we've not had any of the ceasefires. None of them have reached us. We've not had any days of peace. And she basically depicted the Ukrainian forces as systematically going street by street and destroying the houses. And I did definitely see a lot of destroyed houses, including one house that was still smoldering from being hit 2 days prior. And the people that I was meeting there, for the most part, were elderly and had nowhere to flee to. So they had no choice but to stay and be terrorized on a daily, nightly basis. So yeah, and they're perfectly aware, of course, who is doing this to them. You said they're not given any agency. You're right. The Western media has totally disappeared them, like they did the Syrian civilians, by the way, right? Who actually support their army and President Assad. Same thing. They were disappeared because it didn't fit the Western narrative. So I definitely, like, from a personal perspective, I can chime in a little bit from a brief time in Donbass, but certainly the people I met were being terrorized by Ukrainian
You saw it
forces.
firsthand.
Yeah.
You saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the part that frustrates me so much about this conflict, is that all of a sudden you see people changing their profile to have the Ukraine flag. They're wearing these Ukraine flag pins. Women are painting their nails blue and yellow. But you ask them, what's Lugansk? What's Donetsk? They have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea. But you have this Russophobia being ratcheted up to unprecedented levels, and it's terrifying. And the Russians see this. You see, Russia is a sophisticated society. Once again, contrary to what people in the West hear about Russia, it is a very sophisticated society, and they see that they're being targeted, and they see the hate and the vitriol, but they also understand what's happening in their region, because this is very much a fight that's in the family. I mean, this is their area. These are the people that they've known for decades, for centuries. I mean, this is their area. This is their land. This is their history. And all of a sudden, you have all these other countries in Europe lecturing Russia and telling Russia that they're bad and that they're evil and their president is this and that, and they're sanctioning them and they're cutting them off from food, from food companies and clothing manufacturers and all the great things that Western society provided to Russia in their minds over the decades. And the Russian people are just sitting there and they're saying, you know, these people, they want to destroy us. They don't care about Ukraine. And they don't. And the people that have their avatar changed to the flag of Ukraine, they have no idea what Ukraine is, where it is, what's been going on, nor do they care about the people. It is a virtue signal. Yeah. It's a virtue signal that is also morphed into this very evil hatred for an entire culture, country, and history. And that includes people in Ukraine, because people in Ukraine share the Russian history. They're one. These are the same people. You can take away the west of Ukraine, which we can talk about. That's a problem in and of itself. But most of Ukraine is the history and the culture of Russia.
I just want to add on to what we've both said in terms of the at least 14,000 civilians or people that have been killed, the majority of whom are civilians. You know, when I was in the Donetsk People's Republic and meeting these people that are being assaulted on a daily, nightly basis. So what I was hearing was of the Ukrainian heavy shelling, heavy machine gun firing, sniping. But there are horrific crimes committed in addition to that. I mean, recently I participated in a panel. It was about a people's tribunal to hold Ukraine accountable for its war crimes. And we're talking about mass graves and decapitations. We're talking about ISIS level things that have been committed by these Ukrainian forces. And again, these are the people who Western people perhaps just being duped by, you know, social media to pressure them into putting their profile pics as the Ukrainian flag. This is what you're whitewashing. And this is not, of course, to say all Ukrainians are like this, but this is what the people, like, we're talking genocidal levels of murder in Ukraine. And of course, the Western diplomats, when the Russian authorities mention genocide, they laugh it off. They say there's no genocide in Eastern Ukraine. But the other thing I would like you to address, again, with regard to like this whole solidarity with Ukraine, are you in solidarity with the actual people within Ukraine who are being oppressed by these far-right forces, including journalists who are being imprisoned, tortured, assassinated, including civilians who might have sympathies, just sympathies for the people of the Donbass who have been imprisoned, tortured, assassinated? These are not random things. These are things that have happened quite a lot in Ukraine. So what I'd like you to discuss, Alex, is you mentioned earlier far-right forces. Could you flesh out what exactly that entails? Because I think people in the West, if they think far-right, they think of Trump or something like that. But we're talking serious, whatever you want to call them, whether neo-Nazis or nationalists or whatever, Azov brigades. And also you mentioned Western Ukraine is a different thing. So I think you can talk about both that at the same time because they're hand in hand, really.
Yeah, we did a live show the other day and someone gave us a question. They said, why do you call them neo and NAZIs? And I use NAZIs because I don't know what platform this will be going on, but you have to be careful with your wording now. Yeah. But when you talk about the Azov battalion, and this commentator said, they are not neo, they're actually just NAZIs if you look at the history, because right. This is a problem that goes back to those times, to World War II. And mm-hmm. These aren't neo, these are the real deal.
Right.
And they are the real deal. And it's something that is it a minority in Ukraine, in the west of Ukraine? Yeah, absolutely. I think the general population is not like that. But, and this is the big but, these groups are embedded in the military, part of the organized military, the state military, the national military of Ukraine. These Azov battalions, these right sectors, these Svoboda, all these paramilitary groups that are NAZI oriented or influenced, they are part of the standing military. The Azov battalion fights for Ukraine. That's a problem. That's a problem. Taking it even further, these radical far-right elements are part of the government as well. And they exert an enormous amount of influence in the government, an enormous amount. Are they the minority of the government? Yes, but just because they're the minority of the government, it doesn't mean they don't exert a huge amount of influence on how the government acts with regards to its citizens. And that's what you see in Ukraine. You see a small group of people who are very radical to the right in the government, but they have all the power and they rule with fear. They rule with fear because these are people that if Zelensky were to say, I would like to negotiate with the Donbass and with Donetsk and Lugansk and find a solution, these are people who within a couple of hours can bring 50 to 100,000 of their supporters onto the streets. And these are violent supporters, and they're going to wreak havoc in the middle of Kiev. And Zelensky knows this. Zelensky also knows that if he were to do something like this, his life could very well be in danger. I mean, there are confirmed stories that Zelensky went to the front line in Donbass to check on the troops before all of this broke out. You know, now you have those photos of Zelensky in the military gear and everyone thinks that was from the war that happened just now, this conflict. No, those photos were taken, I believe, in April 2020 or 2021. Those were from before this conflict happened. But when Zelensky went to see those forces, which were a lot of Azov battalion guys, they laughed at Zelensky because Zelensky was telling them, we're going to find peace, we're going to do this. And now they told him, they said, just leave, go away. We don't listen to you. And Zelensky walked with, the tail tucked between his legs, embarrassed, humiliated. And he understood that he may be president, a puppet president, but he doesn't have the power. The real power rests with these radical far-right forces and these far-right groups. They are real, and they're a problem. The media reported on them multiple times, the mainstream media, but now they don't exist. They don't exist. And they are a problem in the West Ukraine because that is the area of Ukraine, which is the area of people like Bandera and these people who were Nazi collaborators. Now, people may argue, why did they collaborate with the Nazis? They had grievances with Russia. Okay, there's a lot of history that we could talk about, but it doesn't change the fact that Bandera and his people committed genocide on a mass level, and they cooperated with the Nazis and with Hitler's army. That's a fact. Now, people in West Ukraine can argue the reasons why all of this happened because they consider Bandera a hero. And when you go to Ukraine, there are streets named after Bandera, there are statues of Bandera, but it doesn't change the fact that Bandera and his movement and the people that supported him were collaborating with the Nazis, and they committed horrific, horrendous crimes against Jews, against Poles, against Russians. I mean, these were terrible, terrible elements, and they still exist in Ukraine, and they're embedded. They are embedded in the military, they're embedded in the government. You hear from so many people, oh, well, there's far-right forces in the US or in every country. Okay, there are, but they're not embedded in the military to the extent that the Azov battalion is. I'm just talking about one battalion. They're not in government, and they don't exert an extraordinary amount of power in the government as well. Can you imagine in the US if you had guys with swastika tattoos on their chest in Congress giving speeches? People would freak out. I mean, they do freak out when you say Trump or someone wears a red MAGA hat and people freak out. This goes far, far beyond a MAGA hat, far beyond. But the fact that the Western mainstream media and leaders of Europe and the US support these people, they're trying to whitewash these people,
wild.
Is sickening. It's sickening, but it also follows the playbook of Syria.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing with moderate rebels, and no jihadists here.
Right.
No ISIS here. These are moderate rebels, and we need to support these moderate rebels. Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about, jihadists. I don't know what you're talking about, the horrific things they're doing. No, these are moderate rebels. These are white helmets. They're doing the same thing in Ukraine. They're running the same playbook, and I'm positive that the Kremlin knows this as well because they were instrumental in helping Syria stand on its feet, and they understand the playbook that's being run. Unfortunately, when it comes to the media, all that power lies in the West.
As for the playbook, you're right. It's there are so many parallels. Israel arming and giving medical care to quote unquote rebels in Syria, Israel arming these extremists in Ukraine, the media whitewashing of their crimes, and insisting that they're peaceful creatures that are just bringing democracy. From the very beginning in Syria, these non-moderate, non-rebels were terrorizing the people of Syria, the civilians. They were committing massacres from the very beginning. Because I know Western narrative is like, well, it was a peaceful uprising.
Again, these are two people who have been there and seen it and talked to people, not just researched it or just opinion.
People. And honestly, if you go and you talk with Syrian civilians, most of them don't differentiate between FSA, al-Nusra, ISIS. They're all the same because they're all committing these heinous massacres. So, whereas our media tried to say, well, no, these are moderates, these are not. No, they're not. They're not. And also, maybe you can talk about, you mentioned McCain earlier. He also went to Syria and met with some of these terrorists, if we recall that, right?
Same people.
And then as far as the playbook,
do I need to say more? You said it. The same people, the same playbook.
And as far as the media, we're seeing like the same sort of repetition of propaganda we had on Syria, hospitals being bombed, maternity hospitals being bombed. Ironically, in 2016, I was in Aleppo before it was liberated, and I met the director of a private hospital, Dabit Maternity Hospital, which actually was bombed by the terrorists. And the media didn't report on that. It was hit twice, actually. Once it was hit pretty majorly. I think 3 women were killed. The next time it was hit with a mortar like a week later. Media didn't talk about that. They didn't talk about the Kindi Cancer Hospital, which was like the largest and best in the Middle East, which was completely destroyed by, I believe it was truck bombing in 2012 or so, of course, by the terrorists, and then they manufactured all these stories about hospitals being bombed. And maybe you could speak about, is it in Mariupol, where they claimed there's a hospital? So, but just before you do, I'll just give the precedent of in Eastern Aleppo, there was the Children's and Eye Hospital complex, which was bombed, but why was it bombed? Because the terrorist had, including ISIS, had taken it over, used it as military headquarters, had gutted it completely, and were using it as military headquarters, and had prisons underneath, including torture chambers, where they were torturing Syrian civilians and holding them before the Sharia court, where then they would either be kept longer or killed. So there was a reason for targeting those hospitals, because they were no longer hospitals, they were military installations of the terrorists. But as for the hospital in Mariupol, maybe you can talk a little about that.
Yeah, I also want to add they're running the same chemical weapons false flags that they ran in Syria. They're running the same exact thing. On the other side, though, the Russians are running a lot of the same military operations that they were running in Syria. They're running the same in Ukraine in order to achieve their objectives. So a lot of the cauldrons, a lot of the humanitarian corridors, the on again, off again negotiations, the moving of those jihadists to places outside of the country or in enclaves of the country, constantly going back and forth with Israel or with Erdogan in Turkey and trying to find solutions. It was the military and the diplomacy working constantly, month after month, week after week, year after year, trying to make Syria whole again. And it worked. And credit is given to the Russians, absolutely, because I remember reports where, they were saying that ISIS was 12 kilometers away from Damascus at one point, and that's when the Russians stepped in. I mean, you know much better than I do, but the Russians stepped in, and the Iranians stepped in, but the Syrians really fought, and they fought for their country, and they won. Mm-hmm. Yes, they got support from Russia. Yes, they got support from Iran, but they won. And today or yesterday, Assad is meeting with the UAE, which is historic. And I believe Syria is going to be invited back into the Arab League again. They are back on the international stage. It's a significant event. And it shows that all the Assad must go memes that we saw on the internet, where you had Obama saying Assad must go, and then you had Cameron saying Assad must go, Nikki Haley, Assad must go, Samantha Power, Assad must go, Merkel, Assad, they were all parroting the same line. Assad must go. Assad is still there.
Yeah.
Syria is
shows you how much the distraction things are. They don't actually, these people aren't actually evil or horrible. We're not bombing. I mean, we're still bombing in Syria and still protecting oil fields, but it's not in mainstream media every day because everything's about distraction and hyperfocus. It's not about what's really news relevant and what's really important. That gets lost, completely lost.
Donetsk, Lugansk military is doing a lot of heavy lifting. People say the Russian army. Russia hasn't dedicated that much of their armed forces to this conflict at all. A lot of the heavy lifting, especially in the east, is being done by Donetsk and Lugansk, and they're winning, and they're moving towards the west, and they're taking over towns and villages. They'll say they're liberating them. The Ukrainians say they'll be occupying them. Okay, but they're winning. They've got the Kherson region. They've got Mariupol surrounded. They're trying to get these false flags going. The maternity hospital is one such case. They say there were hundreds and hundreds of patients in this hospital. It was bombed, and X amount of people died, and we saw these slick photos. The interesting part is that Zelensky tweeted about this literally within minutes of it happening, and that's the tell. That's when you know this was staged. They knew what was going on. The same playbooks they ran in Syria. I remember the minute you had chemical attacks in Duma. I remember it. I think it was Kerry. Kerry gets on stage, and correct me if I'm wrong, but someone in the White House gets on stage right away, like within an hour or two, and all of a sudden Assad did it. Right, Assad did it. We don't have people on the ground. We don't have forensic investigators there, but we know. Yes, but we know right away. And they're doing the same thing, and they did the same thing at that hospital in Mariupol. And we found out that one of the girls there that was in these photos, which showed the event that took place in the bombing, ended up being an Instagram influencer.
Right. She was supposed to have been a pregnant woman, right? And supposed to
a pregnant woman. Yeah. I actually think she is a pregnant Instagram influencer. Mm-hmm. You have her page there and everything. It's there for the whole world to see. And a lot of people ask, if this was a hospital that was occupied by hundreds and hundreds of people, why does the official, and this is what the Ukraine is saying, the official death toll was 17 people. But were they Azov people? Were they Ukraine military? Who were these people? If this was a hospital full of hundreds and hundreds of people, what's going on here? It wasn't. It was a hospital that was being used by the military to stage their offensive, to stage their war.
Well, in terms of also a repetition of the Syria playbook, we also have, you mentioned the humanitarian corridors, but then we also have the Ukrainian militants attacking humanitarian corridors when civilians are trying to flee, just like they did in Syria. Exactly. I was on a humanitarian corridor in Aleppo when it was attacked when I was standing on it, 2 mortar shells and another 5 or so afterwards. And this happened all the time. It had happened prior to that particular visit to Aleppo. It happened in Ghouta. You had videos coming out of Syria of Syrian soldiers literally putting their bodies on the line to protect civilians from the firing of the terrorists as civilians fled along humanitarian corridors to the safety of the Syrian army.
And who did they blame? Who did they blame?
Well, of course,
The
they blame
West,
the
the
Green
Western
Army,
Syria.
Russia, Assad. And by the way, I just wanted to touch on what you said at the beginning. Now Putin is the biggest villain, and this is like, I don't need to tell you, but to listeners, like, this is what the media does. They have to vilify the leadership to an extraordinary degree to make the West like just internalize a hatred for them without even understanding why they think they hate them, when in fact, like, I can't speak about Russians. I'm still new to Russia. I can't speak about
your boss is fucking you
Putin's
more than
popularity.
Putin
Maybe
is
you
right
can,
now.
but I can say in my experience
Guaranteed.
in Syria, Assad is loved. He's beloved in Syria. Yes, there are the Muslim Brotherhood types that obviously don't love him, but the majority of Syrians do love him. And that's something I've been saying since my first visit in 2014. And I visited right after the elections then. And during those elections, I was in Beirut waiting for a journalist visa. And I had to wait well over a month, but I finally did get it. And in the interim, the elections happened. So I went to the Syrian embassy in just outside of the center of Beirut. And the streets, the highway was clogged with vehicles going to that embassy. And it stayed open until midnight, not till 7 p.m. as was scheduled, to accommodate all the voters. And it opened for a second day, which was not planned. And so, you had people in the West saying like, well, they were forced to vote. Well, explain how they were forced to vote in Lebanon, right? Explain that. That doesn't make any sense. And then a week later, I was in Syria, in Homs, which at the time had been called the capital of the revolution. And in Homs, there was a massive street party celebrating a week after the fact. And then fast forward to 2020, I went back for those elections. And, it was pretty remarkable to see Assad in Duma, where the alleged chemical attack did not take place, and surrounded by people in Duma, which is a more conservative area, by the way. It tends to be more like Sunni Islam. So, the West would paint these as people who hate the Syrian government. And they were out in the streets dancing and cheering. And I went to Duma with a media delegation shortly after, saw the same thing, and then the Umayyad Square, when the election results were announced, it was just alive with like insane amounts of cheering and enthusiasm. So I know Western commentators say that's staged, but that's just nonsense. If you want to believe that, fine. But I know from my time, which is extensive, like 15 trips to Syria since 2014, I know that the Syrian people actually do overwhelmingly support Assad. That's not to say they don't have criticisms of the government and want change, but he isn't the issue,
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, look, I don't know Assad. I don't know Putin. I don't know the Prime Minister of Greece, Mitsotakis. Do countries have problems?
I never want to play the whole clip of anybody, but that was pretty solid, right? I mean, like I said, I showed you what I saw of her. I showed you my favorite clip from her. I showed you, why she moved to Russia, and she's a Canadian. She's lived in several places. She's traveled a lot of places, and then her take on the conflict. So take it for what you will. It's her opinion, not everyone's. But I think that's a trustable source. That's a reliable source, and that's what we got to look for, right? We got to look for independent journalists, reliable sources, because mainstream media is garbage. They're feeding us straight corporate propaganda. And what do the corporations want? They want endless war because it sells oil, it sells gas. They can price jack us randomly for no fucking reason. Guess what? Russia only supplies 3% of our oil. Why is the price flying out of nowhere for 3% oil? They pursue what? That doesn't even comprehend to make sense. Not even a little. Not even the smallest amount. Alright, let's take a break. Whew, shake off the news. Let's have something a little funny here. Right? Yeah, I got a lineup. I actually written down. I had so much. I missed yesterday. Sunday, all I did was go to a freaking concert, so I got a lot. I want to get to the White House and Chucky the Schumer. We're going to do Chucky the Schumer takedown. We're going to hit the White House from the last 2 days. But first, where was this? This was freaking hilarious. I never seen this before. I was on Twitch all day today, so I got some... Oh, I don't know what's going. Don't know what's doing.
Live streaming can be tricky, and sometimes trying to find...
See that bright brain full of activity?
So I was on Twitch all day today. I got this from somebody else. It's not... I didn't find this... Oh, what's happening? I didn't find this. This isn't my... this isn't my video. This is somebody else's video, obviously. And then they had found it. But I thought this was fucking hilarious. So I'm going to share it with you as well. They're on in the middle of the morning. You guys are here late at night. So very different crowd, right? Let's check this out. It's fucking hilarious. And then we'll get back into some news.
Down that ramp. ramp was probably 10 yards long.
This question is on COVID.
I think you're going to have a big surprise, a beautiful surprise, sooner than anybody would think. But the answer is...
All right. So with that said, Linda, hi, Linda.
I have a question for you. What do you think is your greatest accomplishment in your eyes?
Bro, yo ho, help me. I've been yelling about going down ramps for 30 minutes and my neighbor's starting to get worried about me, but I'm too shy to go explain myself, so I'll just hide. On that note, please like and subscribe and have a great day and a great life.
So I'm like 90% sure that was from the real Dan Cody on Twitch this morning. I saw from him playing it. It's not his, against those guys', but pretty fucking funny. I thought it was pretty good news break before we go to the White House. And now we'll go to Jen Psaki. I heard it was pretty funny yesterday. I did not watch. I was sick. I've been getting sick like twice a month lately. It's super fun. Probably need to see a specialist eventually, but at the moment, don't got that money, yo, or a job, so it ain't happening. But I am back. I'm feeling fine. I think I need to go strict vegan again. Get off the pescatarian crap. But let's do some White House binging, eh? All right. I think I wanted to do yesterday first. Like I said, we got a lot to get to. I did not watch it. We're only watching John.
We have a very special return guest today, Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger, who is here to provide a brief update on cyber. You probably have seen the statement from the president we issued, as well as a fact sheet. She'll talk about that. Has a little bit of time to take some questions, and then we'll do a briefing from there. With that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, the president released a statement and fact sheet regarding cyber threats.
Support any diplomatic effort that they choose to take part in. The role that we feel we can play most effectively is by continuing to provide a broad range of security assistance, military assistance to them, as well as economic and humanitarian assistance to strengthen their hand in these negotiations. And what we always convey publicly and privately is that we're going to be watching closely their actions, not just what words they say. But we just continue to support their efforts and whatever decisions they make about choosing to engage diplomatically. Go ahead.
President Zelensky said if those talks don't work out, it's World War III. Does the president agree?
Without knowing more what President Zelensky means by that, I would say that our view and the president's view is that the way we need to avoid World War III is preventing the United States from having direct military involvement on the ground, and same on NATO direct involvement.
So Zelensky's a bitch? That's what you're saying? He's a bitch?
Is by
He's a
providing
lying
that
bitch.
extensive military assistance that we have been
Is that the
providing,
translation?
economic and humanitarian assistance. So I can't assess. Obviously, I know many of you will speak. We'll hear more from President Zelensky soon, and I would expect he can speak more to what he meant by that.
And related to that, does the president believe that President Zelensky owes him or other NATO leaders a check-in as these negotiations progress and as he may approach a final resolution? Meaning, does NATO or the president want either implied or soft veto power over whatever Zelensky might decide to do?
Well, we support President Zelensky and Ukrainian leaders' decisions, ability to make their own decisions through the course of these negotiations. Now, obviously, if it involves something related to the United States or NATO, we're here to support, but of course, we need to be engaged in that aspect of the discussion.
One last thing. On Face the Nation, the Chinese ambassador said China's position is for peace and that it's constantly doing everything it can to de-escalate. Do you agree with that?
Well, what I would note...
Characterization of what China's doing?
Well, what I would note also in the same interview, he failed to condemn the actions of President Putin. I'm sorry?
It wouldn't make any difference. Do you agree with that?
I think our view is that verbal condemnation of the actions of President Putin and the actions of Russian military is important and vital, and it's about what side of history you want to stand on at this point in time. At the same time, as you know, the president had a lengthy discussion with President Xi on Friday, and we're going to continue to keep those lines of communication open. But what we would note here is also what is absent from a lot of their public commentary, which is condemnation at times. Sometimes it has been echoing of conspiracy theories that the Russians have put out there about chemical weapons, and we note that, what we want to hear is condemnation of what we're seeing on the ground. Go ahead.
Can you walk us through the president's trip a little bit later this week? We know he's going to stop in Brussels first, obviously. Then he goes to Poland, as you announced this weekend. Will he see refugees? Will he deliver a speech? Are there deliverables? Can you walk us through what you can tell us?
There will certainly be deliverables, as there always are on these trips. And there always are. We're still finalizing, believe it or not, the details of the trip and the specifics of what he'll be doing while he's in Poland. He,
just
of course,
one more
will be
person
seeing,
today.
His counterpart there, and he will certainly thank him for the efforts and the work that Poland has done and the leaders have done there to welcome refugees, to get them settled in Poland for this time being, as devastating as the circumstances are. Jake Sullivan is going to be joining us here tomorrow, and hopefully by then we will have more specifics.
He put me to sleep today, man. That was brutal. I watched that live, and I was just cracking my skull. I watched the White House live for like 4 hours today. I think I slept half of it, so maybe I shouldn't say I watched it for 4 hours, but
You mean in terms of the
these people are
military
brutal.
situation on the ground? Well, here's what we've seen on the ground. We're seeing that the Department of Defense has assessed, and I know they've done briefings in this regard, so let me echo this, that there certainly could be some morale issues of troops on the ground, that they are in a stalemate in the sense that they have not been making the level of progress or the pace of progress that they had hoped from the beginning. Now, obviously, things can change rapidly in conflicts, and so we are mindful of that as well. We're also seeing, obviously, over the course of the last couple of days, that fighting around Mariupol is fierce.
I have not, and I am going to be checking that out on the notebook here in a second. I will put it in right after the White House if I like it.
Crimea and cut off Ukrainian forces there from the rest of the country, provide the Russians with
I have
a
to,
new support. But the military situation elsewhere in Ukraine, according to our...
I never in my life watched the White House press briefings until Sean Spicer, and that was like my first time, like, okay, Trump's coming in, I want to start watching this. And it was the greatest experience in my life to watch Sean Spicer every morning, and then to have Saturday Night Live start hitting them. I'm going to put it on my watch later. I got to put it on the watch later so I can put it on here. I don't have a lot of technology, so.
In the past, you've said that domestic oil producers have the leases, resources.
Oh yeah, it's only a minute. Yeah.
Is there any
I'm getting it.
about invoking the Defense Production Act when it comes to energy?
Well, there are a range of ideas out there. That's one of them that a number of people have put forward. I would say that the Defense Production Act would mean giving government funding to companies or to purchase products. That's how it typically works, as you've seen it work with COVID.
All right, I got to save later.
Have the resources they need in order to expand their production.
On government money and supplies, there are reports that the EU is seeking to stockpile iodine pills and nuclear protective gear amid an increased concern about a nuclear threat, and also looking for more ways to deal with potential biological and chemical attacks. Is the U.S. taking similar measures when it comes to these things, especially with iodine pills? Are we taking sort of the lessons learned from the pandemic and applying it to this challenge?
Sure, Jackie, it's a good question. Let me check with our national security team and see if there's any details I can get into. We are always prepared, even as we aren't making predictions at this point in time.
All right.
We don't have confirmation of that report about the Europeans,
think she has
I will check and see if there's more to report.
One more.
There are reports that China has fully militarized at least 3 islands in the disputed South China Sea with anti-ship, anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, fighter jets, despite Beijing's promises not to turn these islands into military bases. What is our takeaway from that, and how are we responding to that?
Well, Jackie, I don't have confirmation of that from here. I've certainly seen the reports. I would point to the Department of Defense for any more specific analysis. But obviously, any escalatory actions in the South China Sea would be of concern to us.
And then one more on the White House assessment of global food insecurity that's sort of coming out of all this.
Sure.
Is there any Is there any money that's going to be allocated to provide diesel fuel to Ukrainian farmers to try to mitigate some of this?
Yeah, so
about going solar,
All right.
but not sure.
That is actually a fantastic Hoser for life. That's a fantastic clip for the in between the two White House clips. So we are absolutely going to check this out. Absolutely, I love it. Thank you very much for this. This is fucking awesome, and I'm excited because I've not seen it before. So I'm stoked, super stoked, and yeah, I just had to make sure my freaking mic was on. And that mic is on, and let's skip this shit and get it started.
Area to examine your roof in person.
President Trump indoors on Saturday behind glass that says face covering required, but his face was uncovered. Why?
the president is somebody who follows the recommendations and the advice.
Is this here? Since I'm watching it, I'm gonna subscribe just to show love since we're checking this out.
Of the CDC, I don't know what the circumstances were of that particular moment.
He was shopping in a store, and on the glass outside it said face covering required, and we could see him inside, and his face was uncovered.
Well, again, Peter, our recommendation and advice continues to be for people to wear masks when they are required in establishments. I don't know what this establishment was. The president obviously follows the advice of his health and medical team.
Is there concern that when the president says today, please wear your mask indoors in public settings around other people, and he doesn't do that, that it's going to make it harder to get people to follow him?
I think you see the American people, and all of you see the president wearing a mask every time he comes out to an event, when he's sitting in meetings, and certainly he will continue to model behavior he hopes the American people will follow. Not.
Talking about cheap taglines, a woman who excels at them and is one of the leading Democrats.
Indoors
Kinda
on
ends
Saturday
abruptly
behind
there.
glass that says face covering required, but his face was uncovered.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Is this my buddy here? Oh my god, this was so brutal today. I don't think it was him though, it was the other guy. So we got glasses guy, and it was so brutal. I had to wake up for it, it was so brutal. That was fantastic.
I'll make a few comments.
I'll be checking her out more. Good call, Hoser.
The president is heading to Europe tomorrow
for life
to reinforce the incredible unity we built with allies and partners in response to Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, and to consult on next steps. Let me take a moment to set the context for this trip. Russia intended to accomplish three basic objectives in launching its unprovoked attack against Ukraine. First, to subjugate Ukraine. Second, to enhance Russian power and prestige. And third, to divide and weaken the West. Russia has thus far manifestly failed to accomplish all three objectives. In fact, it has thus far achieved the opposite. On the first,
on days that I have to transition from one White House press briefing to another, that definitely is going to be my transition clip from here on. I'm saving that one. That was solid. I hate Jen. She just.
On the second, Russian power and prestige has been badly depleted. The Russian military has dramatically underperformed. The Russian economy has been rocked by powerful sanctions. The Russian high-tech and defense sectors are being choked off from key inputs. And Russia is a pariah in the international community. On the third, the nations of the free world are more united, more determined, and more purposeful than at any point in recent memory. For our part, since President Biden in the United States began warning the world of impending Russian aggression back in November, we have clearly and consistently pursued three lines of effort. First, help Ukraine defend itself by supplying weapons and military equipment. Second, impose severe and escalating economic costs on Russia through the application of unprecedented sanctions in close coordination with allies and partners in Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and other parts of the world. And third, fortify NATO and the Western Alliance.
I subscribe to her. If it's her stuff, I'll be checking it out later.
Making our allies more resilient against other forms of Russian aggression.
I'll be checking her out.
We've made decisive moves
in the morning. Weed Wednesday. I'm just gonna get stoned and stream like half the day tomorrow. So we will definitely be looking for comedy clips, and I'll be checking her out for sure.
He will join the G7.
I like Kyle Dunnigan too. He's been cracking me up.
Of the European Union at a session of the European Council. He will have the opportunity to coordinate on the next phase of military assistance to Ukraine. He will join our partners in imposing further sanctions on Russia and tightening the existing sanctions to crack down on evasion and to ensure robust enforcement. He will work with allies on longer-term adjustments to NATO force posture on the eastern flank. He will announce joint action on enhancing European energy security and reducing Europe's dependence on Russian gas at long last. He will announce further American contributions to a coordinated humanitarian response, to ease the suffering of civilians inside Ukraine, and to respond to the growing flow of refugees. From Brussels, President Biden will travel to Poland, where he will engage with U.S. troops who are now helping to defend NATO
I want the
territory.
question and answer. I
and he
don't
will
want to
meet
listen
with
to this guy
experts
fucking
involved in the
talk. What am I
humanitarian
doing?
response. He will also hold a bilateral meeting with President Duda of Poland.
And what do you call on the groups that the president?
I'd be happy to take your question.
There we go.
The
Get
Russians
to
and
it.
the Hungarians seems to be reluctant on imposing a ban on importing Russian oil and gas. Will this weaken the sanctions? And what do you call on the groups that the president is going to meet to expel Russia from the G20, of course, group? And do you think that an agreement with Iran could be reached without Russia?
So when the president announced that the United States was going to ban the import of Russian oil and gas, he was very clear. He said that the United States is uniquely positioned. We are an energy producer. We can do this.
So we want to turn the page here to a very important issue here domestically, and that is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the
we
technology
can do this.
sucks.
We can take this step of banning the import of Russian oil and gas and coal and be able to withstand it, have resilience against it. But he also recognized quite explicitly in that statement that some of our European allies and partners would not be able to follow suit, and he was not going to pressure them to do so. From his perspective, what we have achieved with our European partners in terms of financial sanctions, export controls, and other measures to hit the Russian economy hard have had unprecedented impact on a large economy at a scale we have never seen before. And so he believes that that is, in fact, increasing the costs on Russia. It is sharpening the choice for Russia. And he feels very good about where things stand today in terms of the unity and resolve of the Western alliance on sanctions. And as I mentioned in my opener, we will have more to say on sanctions in the coming days. On the question of the G20, I will just say this. We believe that it cannot be business as usual for Russia in international institutions and in the international community. But as for particular institutions and particular decisions, we'd like to consult with our allies, consult with our partners in those institutions before making any further pronouncements. Finally, we believe that if there is an Iran nuclear deal that meets the standards the president has set, to verifiably block the pathway of Iran to get to a nuclear weapon and put this program back in the box after President Trump let it out of the box when he left the deal back in 2018. We will do that deal because we believe it is in the American national security interest to do so, but we will not do that deal until it meets those objectives. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If you said anything more about the sanctions, you did just say further sanctions. Anything more about what areas that could be in, that would be great. And the other thing, there was a report out that British troops are basically secretly training Ukrainians to use those very sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons to start. Are there any US troops in Eastern Europe or anywhere else currently training Ukrainians?
So as for the first question, I'm not going to get ahead of an announcement which will be rolled out in conjunction with our allies on Thursday when the president has the opportunity to speak with them. That's on a further package of sanctions. What I will say is that one of the key elements of that announcement will focus not just on adding new sanctions, but on ensuring that there is joint effort to crack down on evasion, on sanctions busting, on any attempt by any country to help Russia basically undermine, weaken, or get around the sanctions. That is an important part of this next phase. We have applied an enormous amount of economic pressure. And in order to sustain and escalate that pressure over time, part of that is about new designations, new targets, but a big part of it is about effective enforcement and evasion, applying the lessons that we've learned from other circumstances where we have, in fact, imposed sanctions on countries. So stay tuned for that. On the question of U.S. troops, we do not have U.S. troops currently training Ukrainians. We do not have U.S. troops on the territory of Ukraine. We do, of course, have U.S. troops defending NATO territory, providing reassurance to our allies, deterring Russian aggression. And of course, the United States is playing a key role, not just in the direct provision of military equipment to Ukraine, but in the facilitation of military equipment provided by many of our allies as well. Yes.
Two questions quickly. Moments ago, you said at the beginning that Russia would never take Ukraine. But does the president believe that Ukraine can win a military victory here? And if so, why haven't we heard that from him thus far? And then my second question is, with regards to Russia and partnership with the United States and certain institutions, what does the president hope that Russia can bring to the Iran nuclear deal? What do they have to bring to the table after they've rightfully been made a pariah on the world stage?
So I can describe to you what happened with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action back in 2015. One of the key roles that Russia played in the implementation of that deal was that Russia actually accepted the enriched uranium from Iran so that Iran's stockpile stayed below 300 kilograms total, meaning that stockpile was so small that Iran could not swiftly break out to a nuclear weapon. That is a key part of how we ensured that Iran's nuclear program was in a box. Now, we don't have to rely on any given country for any particular element of the deal, but that is a role that Russia played in the past, a practical role that didn't have necessarily political significance, but did have that practical significance. What I said was that Russia's never going to take Ukraine away from the Ukrainian people. It's never going to be able to subjugate the Ukrainian people. That was not a statement about a particular slice of territory that a Russian advance could occupy for a period of time, or about a particular battle that some Russian element could win. I would refer you over to the Pentagon in terms of the best military analysis for how particular battles and particular fronts will play out. But what I will say this, whether Russia takes a city or takes a town or takes more territory, they are never going to be able to achieve the purpose that they set out, which was to subjugate this country, to bring this country to heel, because the Ukrainian people have made very clear that they will not be subjugated, no matter what it takes. Yes.
Jim, thank you for being here. But to follow up on that question, is it the policy of this government that Ukraine should win this? It should eject Russia and regain its sovereignty and its freedom.
We've said from the outset that we are unwavering in our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Within the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, we remain committed to that as our proposition for this. But in the immediate day-to-day of this conflict, our focus is on ensuring that Ukraine has the tools that it needs to defend itself and to be able to effectively ensure that Russia cannot achieve its objectives in Ukraine. That's what we're focused on right now. But on the basic proposition of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, from day one of the Biden administration, we have not wavered an inch on that. Yes.
On Article 5 and any cyber attack that comes now, obviously Russians have done it before. It wasn't an Article 5 issue then. Something in Ukraine now changed the contour of a cyber attack against any member nation of NATO become an Article 5 issue.
So in the June summit,
The President raised that just yesterday as dramatically as he did.
So last June, when the NATO leaders gathered for the NATO summit, President Biden, consulting with them, we put out a statement that spoke to cyber attacks and their relationship to Article 5. And we could see circumstances in which a collective response by the alliance to a cyber attack would be called by an ally. That is absolutely something where we and other countries could bring capabilities to bear to help a country both defend itself and respond to a particular cyber attack. Now, that's not necessarily the same thing as a military response. That response could take many different forms. But we have made clear through NATO documents now, not just last year, but going back years, that cybersecurity is an alliance issue. It is an issue where collectively NATO is prepared to pull together both to enhance resilience, enhance defenses, and if necessary, use the appropriate tools to respond. Yeah.
It's been just over a week since you met with your Chinese counterpart, a couple days since the president spoke with President Xi. Have you seen any indications that China will or will not provide assistance to Russia?
I can't make predictions going forward. What I can tell you is we have not seen since those meetings or since the president's conversation with Xi the provision of military equipment by China to Russia. But of course, this is something we are monitoring closely. We will continue to monitor it. And the president made clear to President Xi the implications and consequences of any such provision of equipment, and they very well understand one another.
Is there just on the agenda at the NATO summit, will there be an effort to try to put specific concrete steps in place if China does provide that assistance?
The president will certainly consult on the question of China's potential participation in the conflict of Ukraine while he's in Brussels. He'll do so at NATO. He'll also do so when he addresses the 27 leaders of the European Union, because on April 1st, the European Union is having a summit with China. And so this will be an opportunity Thursday for the United States and our European partners to coordinate closely on what our message is. We believe we're very much on the same page with our European partners, and we will be speaking with one voice on this issue. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on your comment about shoring up the eastern flank of NATO. Do you anticipate additional U.S. troop deployments to Europe?
Well, I think there are two issues that are important to lay out. One is what's required in the immediate term. And right now, Secretary of Defense, Supreme Allied Commander Europe, believe that they have effective posture today for what's necessary today. But of course, that could evolve in the coming days and weeks depending on Russia's actions and depending on the overall threat picture. The second is, what is the longer term force posture, not just for this contingency, this emergency, this invasion, but over the course of time. That is something the President will discuss with his allies at the NATO summit on Thursday. Yeah.
Follow up on Russian troop casualties. Russian media reports that the outlets linked on hackers in the EU suggested that almost 10,000 Russian servicemen have been killed and 16,000 have been wounded in Ukraine. Is your assessment that that number is realistic, or how bad do you think the casualty situation is for Russia?
I refer you to the
Such
Pentagon
a bullshit
for precise
answer
casualty
here.
figures. We do believe it numbers in the thousands, but it is a necessarily imprecise analysis from our part to be able to get
Fuck does that even mean?
that number down to the precise figure. So I would refer you over to the Pentagon for that.
The president said yesterday, Jake, that cyber warfare is a capability
Shitty
that
ass
has been
answer.
decided to not use yet in this iteration of this war. But administration sources have told us the Russians have this multi-phase plan to target critical infrastructure that is already underway. I'll give you a couple of specifics. 2 weeks prior to the invasion, 21 U.S. energy companies targeted by hackers. They're involved with LNG production. March 9th, ISA and the FBI began working with an unnamed American pharmaceutical company whose top execs were targeted with malicious phishing attacks. Internally, the administration has attributed that to Russian intelligence. I have a list of stuff that goes on and on here. Suffice it to say, this how do these acts not constitute cyber warfare so far already?
So first, the president put out a statement yesterday, a very strong, clearly worded statement, in which he said, based on evolving intelligence, we believe that attacks could occur. Now, the Russians have spent years preparing the ground for attacks, trying to get inside
that
systems.
they are not already underway? Just want to clarify.
Well, what I think we would distinguish between is gaining access to a system, which could be used for a variety of purposes, intelligence collection, or mere preparation for a future attack, and the actual disruptive, destructive type of attack of the kind you saw that shut down the Colonial Pipeline last year, for example, or attacked JBS Foods. And it's really that latter thing that we have not yet seen. But how one defines cyber warfare or cyber attacks, of course, is going to differ across individuals. The distinction the president was making was the distinction between all of that preparatory work, which has been ongoing for years and has in fact intensified, and the type of destruction or disruption, the launch of a particular form of malware, for example, that would result in the kinds of physical effects we've seen in past attacks.
Thanks, Jake. I wanted to ask about concerns about the use of nuclear weapons, including possibly smaller nuclear weapons. Can you just address those concerns and talk about how that might
including smaller, because that would be a smaller
Well,
war?
President Putin, in the early days of the conflict, actually raised the specter of the potential use of nuclear weapons. It is something that we do have to be concerned about. Based on our current analysis, we have not changed our nuclear posture to date, but we are constantly monitoring for that potential contingency, and of course we take it as seriously as one could possibly take it. We will be consulting with allies and partners on that potential contingency among a range of others and discussing what our potential responses are, but I'm not going to speak to that from this podium today. I'm going to let the president have the opportunity to speak with his fellow colleagues on what is a very weighty matter. Yeah.
Are Vladimir Putin's days numbered, Jake? Are Vladimir Putin's days in power numbered?
From our perspective, what happens with respect to the Russian political system is something that will be worked out inside Russia. What we can do is put forward our basic three lines of effort. That's what we're doing, helping the Ukrainians defend themselves, fortifying the NATO alliance, and imposing costs and consequences.
We got time for one more. I have two questions on Russia and North Korea and China. There is a report that the North Korea's cyber hacking organization is related to Russians cyber criminal organizations. Do you have any information on that? And I forgot.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Oh, please don't.
North Korea's cyber hacking organization is really.
It's time to take action. Start by talking to your doctor to see if Descovy is.
So, I wanted to move on to Florida. Jordan Sheridan is down here right now talking to Congress members, talking to people running for some Congress seats, and also talking to some high school students about the LGBTQ Don't Say Gay bill and that whole fucking thing that's happening down here. So, this was a fantastic discussion that I watched live today on Twitch.
We can all be online at the same time.
You can find Jordan Sheridan on Twitch, on Rumble, on Rockfin, on YouTube, on probably on Odyssey and fucking everything else, because he's got to be everywhere. He is, again, another person that you don't have to agree with what he says day to day, but you do have to take his reporting seriously because he asked the right question, he goes out and he talks to people. And this was a good conversation. These are just high school kids.
Need more confidence in ourselves.
No. She's like, I can't do this. Like, literally can't get out of class.
Dang.
But I was like, yeah, I'll be fine.
It's a cool first name, Echo. Oh, thank you. I chose it, so.
I like your ring.
You're good. Thank you.
Hey, it's Jordan. We are here in front of Winter Park High School in
It's a
Orlando.
good conversation.
It is hot.
Let's have a conversation.
White and pasty, so hopefully this goes well. We've been doing reporting for the last 2 days. Started out in Tampa and St. Petersburg, which is about an hour and a half from here. Interviewed Michelle Rayner, who is running for Congress. She's the first openly gay woman of color.
Status quo, find it everywhere, guys. Anywhere you look, status quo.
Parents and students last night, and we just came from an interview with Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who is running for Congress here on the affordable housing crisis.
Really
here
good
in Orlando
interview
and
with
all of
the
Florida.
my
I'm happy to be here in front of
congresswoman.
the high school
Fantastic.
With students, LGBTQ that are under direct threat from this bill that they're calling, a parental rights type of thing, but in reality is really just an effort to put a gag order on any discussion of sexual identity, LGBTQ, same-sex parents. That's why they're calling it the Don't Say Gay bill. I'm joined by Echo, Will, and Elena. And you guys are all students here. And I know Will has even written a piece for the New York Times on how this will affect students here. Let's start just kind of a little bit about yourself, whatever you want to share about some of the things you have dealt with before this bill in terms of becoming more comfortable with yourself, acceptance, possible bullying that you all have experienced? If you could talk about that.
I can start. I have dealt with a lot of different struggles from different areas in regards to being queer. I mean, growing up, I knew that I was different, and I felt more comfortable expressing myself in an androgynous and more feminine way, and that was clear from like kindergarten. And I never really knew why, and because no one ever explained it to me until 7th grade, I had this idea as a child that I was broken. And I've been working the past 5 years to unlearn that, but during that time, and during not just when I was a kid, but to now, you know, I've dealt with severe bullying for my sexuality and for how I express myself. In October of 2021 even, I went to a Halloween party and I had guys surround me and call me slurs, physically threaten me. But that's not even the first time that situations like that have happened. I've been followed home, I've been called slurs in the hallways at school, I've had so many attacks on social media. It's just been a fact of life for me since I was a little kid, getting bullied for how I express myself. So seeing the Don't Say Gay bill pass through the House and Senate has been horrifying.
It sounds like you've had physical safety issues and threats too.
100%. 100%. On a side note, I know Michelle Rayner and Maxwell Frost personally, and they're amazing. And
Yeah,
I love that you interviewed them.
Yeah, they're great. What about you, Echo? What's been your journey?
So when I was younger, I wasn't sure why everyone acted a certain way when, you know, girls were told to act a certain way and guys apparently were a lot different and treated a lot differently. I saw, even because I have older brothers, they were treated a lot differently than I was, and I didn't really understand it at the time, and I kind of still don't, because I just wanted to be like my brothers. I wanted to just exist and not always deal with, you know, oh, well, you're a girl, you can't do that. That wasn't something that I enjoyed dealing with. It wasn't something that I was okay with dealing with either. But
this is a good conversation if anybody wants to have a little talk. If not, I'm going to let this happen for a minute. I'm going to smoke before we move on to some more.
Misgendering is an almost
Keep the night rolling. I got a lot to go through, but
it's mainly just
these are good conversations
I am currently considered homeless. I am living with
that I don't have the
currently,
voice of.
And it was not the whole reason, but a lot of the issues that are the reason why I am now not living with any form of family has to do with the way that I was treated after I came out to my parents. It started with, you know, I said that I was pansexual, and a lot of things of just, well, no, now you can't be around your friends anymore outside of school, and it was a lot of forced isolation. And as soon as I said that I didn't think I was a girl, it was, well, now just don't talk to us. You're not that, you're confused, all these different things, and it was just really tough trying to figure out who I was when everyone was telling me that it was wrong. So.
Right. And also, one part of the bill would actually make it so teachers have to alert parents about, you know, if students are bringing up these feelings. And a lot of students don't want to tell their parents for the exact reasons you're talking about.
And the worst part of that was that I was outed. Sorry. The worst part was that I was outed to my parents about being non-binary. I wasn't the one who told them. It was actually a friend of mine or...
I'm Nick Nimmin, and I'm a StreamYard user. For the last 6 years, I've been live streaming consistently to YouTube and Facebook and everywhere.
A friend of mine who thought that it was a good idea, thought that I just needed to be more confident in myself, that I needed to just go for it, when that's not the case, when a lot of the people around you have such a stigma against you that if you do tell them there are serious health issues, like medical safety issues that you can deal with, there's any number of things that can go wrong with telling someone, especially when that person is the one making sure that you are healthy, making sure that you're fed, making sure that you have a roof over your head. It's not easy.
And that really also goes to show, you know, a lot of those in support of House Bill 1557 have been pushing this idea that parents know what's best. It was said on the House floor, it was said on the Senate floor, representatives of Ron DeSantis have said it online, and I mean, this is just proof that parents don't know what's best for their kids, especially when it comes to the queer community. And, you know, of course,
DeSantis
parents
sucks.
should have certain rights when it comes to education, but their rights shouldn't endanger students, which is exactly what this bill is doing.
And also, you know, parents have the option to homeschool their students if they want.
Yeah.
So this idea of parental power that's spreading mostly by Republicans parents should know what's being taught, but that's different than controlling what's being taught. And this bill basically deputizes parents to be judge, jury, and executioner, because if you share stories, if somebody shares stories about their same-sex parents or discusses anything, and the bill is so vague that we don't even know what you can and cannot discuss, then Johnny's mommy could sue the school. So it really is beyond a slippery slope.
And it's not even like, it doesn't even go through a regular court system. It goes to a special magistrate appointed by the Commissioner of Education, who's appointed by Ron DeSantis. It's a bias situation that fast tracks the judicial process and makes it just, it's not justice, it's not fair, and it's so horrifying.
And the amount of petitions that I've seen being done, and nobody even thinks maybe that the community is, not a threat to society, and people are petitioning in our favor, and nobody looks at it, nobody talks about that, because of the fact that they want to push this narrative of that we are these monsters. Or
it's literally writing into law a decades-old stereotype that queer people are somehow the same as pedophiles or the same as groomers.
We are inherently sexual.
Inherently sexual, inherently perverse. Exactly. I mean, Ron DeSantis' own, I don't remember the title, but press secretary, yeah, that's right, went on Twitter and said it's an anti-grooming bill. And that is such a blatantly obvious dog whistle to legally enforce this stereotype that has put queer people in danger, that has gotten us killed. That is the reason we have, higher homicide rates, right? So they are putting us in danger, and they know what they're doing, and
murder rates, I think. Homicide rates makes it sound like they kill people. No, they're getting killed.
Anyone who would be affected by this. I was
hate
at
crime
the age
is
that this
fucking
really would have affected me not that long ago. So,
and we should point out, the critics say, the supporters say it's only for grades K through 3. Well, if you read the bill, it could be basically. It could be subject to any grade based on
through 12 in any manner deemed inappropriate.
Yes.
That's the wording of it. And the thing is,
I've deemed what's inappropriate.
Exactly, and I've gotten so many comments on social media recently saying, "Oh, well, we don't want to teach sex to 1st through 3rd graders," and there's already Florida statutes in place to make sure that sex ed is taught at the proper ages. So that's not even an issue. It was a non-issue that they're solving. They made up a problem to harm the queer community. It's not like there was,
Tell us about your story, Elena.
Yeah, I sadly went through middle school in Texas. So my
cameraman here is from Texas, so he has your pain.
I didn't realize I was trans until somewhat recently, and I think a big part of that was the first time I ever really heard of being trans was when the bathroom bill in Texas was being discussed, and a lot of people were talking about trans people, like you were saying, like sexual deviants, like they are going into bathrooms, and they're specifically targeting trans women, that just saying that they're going in to be pedophiles and to sexually assault people. And so growing up with that, it actually took so long for me to realize, and even once I realized, to become comfortable with who I was. And so I'm lucky enough to have semi-supportive adults in my life, but I still constantly hear like, oh, you were turned trans, like, like your identity is the result of outside influences, and you need to hide that as if it isn't just an inherent part of who I am, and I shouldn't have to pander to bigots just so they feel more comfortable.
Right. And I'd also like to ask all of you, honestly, I was miserable in high school, separate from this. I had depression issues, didn't really feel like I had a solid group of friends. There's all sorts of issues just being a middle school, high school student. Then you're talking about elementary school. Then you throw on top of it this pandemic, out of school, remote learning, then in school, but the pandemic. So I have to imagine, just separate from the inherent obstacles you face as LGBTQ, you already have other obstacles just being a teenager.
Oh, 100%. School's been so rough. This year, I don't even know I surround myself mostly with queer people, and like everyone I know is suicidal. I'm on antidepressants. Everyone I know has, like, it's terrible.
I have a bag of medication.
Yeah, exactly. Every single person is either on antidepressants or like extremely suicidal, and that's where we're at right now. And so, like you said, coupling the pandemic and queerness, and then just being
Mental
a teenager,
health,
being
dealing with-
forced to wake up at 5 and 6 in the morning to get to school at 7. You know, all of it puts you
The
in.
pressure of being a senior as well. It's our
Exactly.
last year in high
I'm a
school.
junior.
I hated school, and I'm average. I hated school. I despised every second of school, and I am so freaking average. And I mean, the state of Florida is making it fucking harder for people. Like, it pisses me off to the. I'm trying not to have an anxiety attack. I've been unbalanced anyway, and I'm trying to have this be my outlet, but fuck's sakes, people. I fucking hate Florida. I live here. I am going to give my vote to proper candidates who will, try to protect rights. And I hate this bill. I want to go protest it, but every chance I get gas $5 a gallon. I can't drive 4 hours across the state without a job. Like, I want to go protest, but we haven't had one in Tampa in the recent. But these high school kids are walking out. I think Brandon was one of the first ones. That's an hour, 45 minutes, an hour from here. So, yeah, I mean, these kids are walking out. These kids are showing their resolve. They're stepping up to the plate. It's really, really nice stuff to see, and it's encouraging. It's encouraging that they're willing to fight for this, and they see the fucked upness. And it's not just a few people at these walkouts. It's not just a few.
In high school, pressure just increases as you get older.
Yeah.
It's no longer you have time. It's you need to do this now.
And also a big thing is I feel like during the pandemic, a lot of people had the time and were able to look into who they were as a person, and that's when a lot of people were able to figure out that they were part of the LGBTQ community. And one of the things that I've heard a lot is that there's this epidemic of queer people coming around, and it just being.
I've not heard that phrase.
I consistently.
Seriously?
And the fact.
So people saying that basically kids just having too much time and being bored during COVID made them.
It's like a trend.
Yeah,
basically.
they think that it's
like they were
fun.
bored.
They think that it's they think that we're doing this for attention or because we want to be like everyone else, but
Yeah.
they don't realize how much we're being persecuted. Why would we want to be something that's going to be gone after by everyone around us?
People think that somehow people think that being queer is a new thing. But that's only because we've been relatively mainstream accepted recently. But it's not a new thing. It's been here forever at the same rates. We just had to hide it. So this bill is just, it's one of many anti-LGBTQ bills currently in legislation, but I think there is this false idea that if we sort of force people back into the closet and make it harder again, that it will reduce how many people are queer, but it won't. It'll just increase suicide rates, and it'll increase homelessness rates. And
I'm glad you bring that up. Because it also is a life or death matter. The Trevor Project has statistics that for LGBTQ students that are able to learn about it, talk about it at school,
they're 23% less likely to. Yeah.
The suicide rate is 23% lower. So now, if you have students, teachers twisting themselves into pretzels, the anxiety of knowing what you cannot talk about, is your teacher going to be sued? Are you going to get in trouble? You're already talking about most of the LGBTQ people are suicidal.
Including myself. Like, I'm on antidepressants now, so I'm okay. But after it was thing after thing. I mentioned the party, but then the next day, while I was trick-or-treating with my friends, we had 3 separate people call us slurs while we were just walking. Then the next day, I was in the bathroom, and people came up to me and were like, "Be careful, we're homophobic." It was just 3 days in a row, and that was just 3 things from the entire school year. It's a regular thing. I could go on for hours with stories of small, times where I was put in uncomfortable situations, or people were homophobic or rude or whatever. And Florida already has the highest LGBTQ suicide rate of any state.
Ugh.
And queer teens are 4 times more likely to commit suicide. And they know that, because I said that and I was one of hundreds that said that when testifying in the Senate and the House of Representatives. I went door to door talking to senators and representatives, Republican and Democrat, telling them these statistics and telling them personal stories. They heard me, they listened.
DeSantis is
and they voted
garbage.
for it anyways, because they know what they're doing, and they are trying to kill us.
He's just throwing red bait at the red, hoping the red will suck him up and make him the next fucking king.
I think it's intentional.
DeSantis is
They know all the
garbage.
statistics. They know all the personal stories. If you watch I testified in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. For every one person testifying in support, there were 4 testifying against. People testifying against used facts, statistics. There were experts. Leaders of suicide hotlines came in, and all sorts of things. And then the people on the other side were using the Bible as examples. And we have a separation of church and state. It's written into the Constitution. That isn't a valid reason to pass a... It's so complex and deep, but I truly believe they are doing it on purpose. That they are trying to hurt us on purpose. Because it's not like they're unaware, it's not like they're oblivious. I told Senator Baxley, who sponsored this bill, to his face, these statistics and how this bill would directly affect me.
That will be somebody I'm following in 7 years. That's going to be a reporter in 7 years.
If the governor
I hope.
signs this, and
he said he would.
Seems like he will. This is just stage 1. What comes next after this?
Oh, 100%. This is the second parental rights and education bill.
Yeah.
This is not the only bill hurting the queer community. I mean, House Bill 1467, which is the book banning bill, and House Bill 7, which affects a multitude of marginalized communities when it comes to education. And this passing, right after the Don't Say Gay bill passed in Florida, a similar bill was filed in Georgia, and a similar bill was filed in Iowa, and a similar bill was filed in Texas. It set a precedent. So not only is this the beginning in Florida, but it's the beginning in the entire country, and it's really scary.
It's not ending anytime soon.
Yeah, and
I mean, already if you talk to someone about, your...
It's time to take action. Start by talking to your doctor to see if Descovy is right for you. Whether you and your doctor just
stories, it's, well, you have no right to be upset, you're just a gay person. You're one person, you're a kid, or I'm not even a kid, I'm legal, but it's, well, you should know better then. You're old enough to know that these kids shouldn't be learning this. Why not? My identity isn't.
But also, that's the thing. What exactly is being taught that's so concerning? It's not like like kindergarten to 3rd graders are learning about sex or orgies or anything like that.
They're not. And nobody's pushing for that. And we should be learning about sexual orientation in the queer community in those grades. And they say, oh, they don't need to be teaching that stuff. That stuff is my community. That stuff is my identity. We learned about the Holocaust in 3rd grade. We learned about the harsh conditions of enslaved people in 3rd grade. Granted, not as well as it should be taught, but it was taught. So why aren't we learning about Stonewall? And why aren't we learning about, the Violet Scare? And why aren't we learning about the existence of the queer community? If I'd known that being queer existed, that would have saved me years of suffering. Just knowing that it was real. And they are outlying that. And it's so disturbing.
Yeah, and it's not only just to how it affects ourselves, it's also spreading a broader band of support. I mean, I can imagine just if I was in elementary school again and then hearing that some people have 2 moms, some people have 2 dads, some people, maybe explaining the basis, the tiniest bit of gender, just explaining, hey, some people have a different sense of self than what their body is. That's all we're asking for. And yet they think we want to teach them about comprehensive sex education for LGBTQ people.
But they don't think that. They know that that's not happening.
But they still push it off as though we are.
Because they want to frame queer people as pedophiles and as groomers because they want to hurt us. It is a direct attack. That's what this is.
They're assholes.
There's no, misinformed, uneducated. No. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it anyways, and it's disgusting.
Let me ask you also, because you mentioned, unfortunately, you're houseless right now because of your relationship with your family. In Florida, there's a lot of LGBTQ people that are homeless, and that's tough enough. And now this, can you kind of talk about the homeless epidemic among LGBTQ people?
So I was actually for a while living in a homeless shelter. I'm not allowed to give the name due to confidentiality reasons and the safety of the people who are currently living there. But the amount of people who were living there, 95% of them were LGBT of some degree, of some form, and these people, most of them were kicked out of their houses, some of them were assaulted physically, sexually, and just the abuse that they saw daily. My story seems very, very tame compared to a lot of theirs, and a lot of them dealt with so much harassment throughout the years, and some of them either left willingly because they thought that it was easier on the streets than where they were living, or they would have a better chance of survival there, and some of them were just kicked out of their houses way before, the legal age to be moving out, and the way that these parents will manipulate the story of, well, they were doing this, this, and this, well, that, if they were not in the LGBT community, would that have been okay for you to do? You wouldn't have condemned anyone else doing that to their kids if the kid was, you know, straight, if the kid was cisgender. It's, if we don't fit what they want us to be, then we're no longer something that they want to have around, that they need to have around, that they're okay with having around even. And that makes a lot of us feel more expendable. And why are we going to continue, you know, dealing with this issue of, you know, trying to be accepted by these people when all we've ever known?
So there's a Florida police chief who was fired over minority first practices in hiring, meaning he was hiring people of color first. We got a clip. Let's take a look at the clip.
I made the decision that it was in the best interest of the department to separate with the current chief of police.
Fort Lauderdale City Manager Chris Lagerblum announcing his decision to fire Police Chief Larry Scarrato after just 6 months on the job. The allegation is discrimination in promoting officers. Scarrato is firing back.
The EEOC report is a report built on hearsay. There's no testimony. There is no transcript. There's no audio.
An investigation alleged that Scarrato made promotions based on race, gender, and sexual orientation. The report says at one point Scarrato was pointing to a wall of pictures of command staff saying, "That wall is too white. I'm going to change that."
The bottom row had several white males and one white female, and we were talking in conversation as it relates to our community and the expectation of a diverse and inclusive organization. And how do I report that we have that if the entire bottom row are white men?
Diversity in any department is a plus, and we strive to be diverse in our organization. We strive to represent the community that we serve. There's just certain lawful ways to allow that diversity to happen, and in this case, the investigative report indicated we didn't quite follow the law.
James, what is your initial reaction here, man?
You know,
I heard you say my dog.
First of all, it's Fort Lauderdale, and I'm just like, damn. And then when I tell you that they scared, but this man is looking for the people, is hiring people that's in that community, and that's right. The LGBT community is really big down there. Okay, right. The black community is really huge down there. People of color are really huge down there. So when he said he let that wall too white, goddamn right, it's too white. Change all of that.
It's a fucking
Get the people
Latin
from the community that, that needs to be in there, that knows how to work their community. That's what we need.
Yep. Yeah. And that's that on that, Captain.
Latin community.
Because let's be real. I'm gonna say that's that on that and then go into my own diatribe. I hate me. These cats don't even live in the cities that they police. They come from the suburbs. They're coming from Perrine. Well, they may not drive that far, but they're coming from Miramar, right? They out there in the nicest of neighborhoods, and they come into the city of Fort Lauderdale, and they take taxpayer dollars, beat up our citizens, because we know what y'all doing. Come on, I'm from now one place I know and I can call home is Fort Lauderdale, and I know that place a little too well, right? We know what y'all doing. Y'all taking all the money out of there. All these police officers don't look like nobody in Fort Lauderdale. You're right, James. Fort Lauderdale is diverse. Go in the neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale and show me that's predominantly white. In the city of Fort Lauderdale proper, show it to me. I mean, maybe down in Las Olas area, if you're going to include that, I don't know. Maybe you find some folks, and that's the LGBTQIA community down there. So it's got a reason to be diverse,
right?
But here's the game. The game is now, oh, you want to give us diversity. If you give us diversity, then that means you're a racist, and now we can fire you.
So he did the right thing. He just did it a little too early. There wasn't the proper chain of command in place for him to make that, you know what I mean, to try to make that change. So
he came
expand on that a little bit more.
just like, I mean, it goes to
where the fuck's that voice coming from?
Just changing everything from the local level. But in order to make those changes, you gotta have the support of your mayor and your and what's up from that, and then your governor and the city council and stuff like that. So he was, it was right place, wrong time, if you put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I can't disagree with you.
Because he was only there for 6 months?
God, they got rid of that boy so quick. God damn.
He came in, he was like, "Oh no, he changed it too much." No, man.
Oh, he actually mean diversity.
Right.
He came in and meant diversity and inclusion.
He probably ran on that because don't you have to be elected to be the police chief? Isn't the police chief elected, or are they appointed?
No, not in the city structure. The sheriff there is elected, but in the city structure, that's usually a hired position.
Okay.
Right, and then if it's a city manager, a strong, if it's a weak mayor, strong city manager, like we just saw, he's able to pull the trigger on a firing. So that tells me the city manager down there got a little bit too much power. Maybe that's my estimation.
So he pulled the classic interview move. He went in there, he did the song and dance in his interview. In the back of his mind, he was like, "Oh, I'm about to shake it up when I get in here." He just spoke a little out of turn, a little too.
Sorry to that man.
He shook the table a whole lot. Oh, you shaking?
Now listen. We're laughing, but we do stand in solidarity with you, brother. But we're gonna giggle a little bit because you really thought you were gonna be able to pull this off in that racist ass style. We appreciate you. No, because that's like we were talking about Brian Flores. Like, it takes courage. Somebody got to be the first out the gate. Like, shout out to that man for taking it on the chin.
Yep.
The next person, understand you got to change the city manager first. So let's work on that. Let's get rid of that city manager. I just be throwing around stuff.
Yeah. And
threatening people's jobs and stuff.
Speaking of Brian,
like I got power.
Dr. Matt, I'm coming for you next week, buddy.
These guys are decent at least, right?
Dr. Bag while he ain't here.
I know. I'm gonna send him a text too when we're done, just to let him know. So,
and I'm assuming, Dwayne, I'm assuming that your microphone has been on to the audience all this time, right?
Yeah,
okay, all right. Go ahead, man. So Brian Flores, what's going on with Brian Flores?
I'm gonna save it because ain't nothing going on with Brian Flores. That's why I'm gonna save it so me and Dr. Matt can have that conversation again.
Because I do remember.
I think all of us remember
how passionately our brother Dr. Mack. This is so unfair. We should not be roasting him in his absence.
Exactly, he's not here. Look,
he can't defend himself. Somebody cut this segment, send it to Dr. Mack because we're gonna say it. We're gonna say it again when he's back.
Here to a very important issue here domestically, and that is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the teachers are on strike. I believe this is the second week of the strike, but we'll find out if I'm wrong about that. Very happy to be joined by Kristen Melby, who is a teacher in Minneapolis, been with the Minneapolis Public Schools for 15 years, an elementary environmental educator. Kristen, thank you so much for being with us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
well,
you were right. We're in week 2.
We're in week 2. Okay, good. I'm glad I was right about that. Trying to follow it as closely as possible. We're honored to have you here. I've seen you guys singing Purple Rain. You've had a lot of big demonstrations. But for those who haven't seen, give us the context of why you all went out to the picket line.
Yeah, so we've been in negotiations for 13 months, and the district has maintained that the status quo is fine for students and staff, and we overwhelmingly say no. We had a historic strike vote. 97% of teachers voted to go on strike. 98% of ESPs, which are our support staff in our buildings,
that is a long fucking time, guys. 13
voted to go on strike. So no one here is going to settle for the status quo. I think after the pandemic, we saw that schools are essential. If people didn't know that before, they should know that now. And the district continues to refuse to let us even come to the table to be part of decision making. And I see these pictures right now of the strike band. Like, I think you see on the streets right now joy in our resistance, because there's been so much repression for so long that people are feeling just like this is such a righteous struggle, and we are finding joy in it, even in the fact that this is difficult. It's difficult to be away from our students after all these months through the pandemic, but we know that it's the right work to do right now.
I'm glad you said that, because it really does feel like we're at a critically important inflection point. We talk about public education. We've seen so many teachers, have been leaving the profession because it's just so difficult with all these challenges. And I'm curious your thoughts about this. It feels like if there was ever a time, it's probably always a time for this, that if we don't invest in public education now, the impacts of this are going to be catastrophic on our young people over the next, decade or so.
Yeah, I would say, the comparison to sort of our healthcare system, right? Like, if we didn't figure that out during a pandemic, that we need to invest because we all do better when we're all doing better, then what will it take, right? I feel like we had the opportunity in Minneapolis to do things right when we came back from our distance learning. We could have kept our class sizes small to meet the mental health challenges of students. We could have kept them small and brought in more support staff to make sure that those students who
employ everybody, get everybody back to work. Why didn't we?
Got their needs met, and we didn't do that. And part of why we didn't do that is because the imbalance of power between the district and educators and communities is completely out of whack, right? We were never brought into the conversations of how and when and in what nuanced ways to bring students back into buildings and what kind of supports they needed.
It's all for profit. They don't actually care how to restructure it properly.
Into that. And so
it's a
mistake after
business.
mistake after mistake was made. And so you see not only educators leaving, but students leaving. And if educators and families were at the table, I think we would have had a really different outcome. I'm a parent. I have an 8-year-old in the district as well. No, sorry. I just want to say, I live that experience from both angles, right? And I am committed to public education, not only for my own child, but for everyone's children. And the district has to be forced to do better.
That's
Sorry,
interesting, actually, an interesting, no, please. It's an interesting dynamic, actually, because so often the narrative that's promoted, particularly in the mainstream press, and then, of course, by the anti-union types, is teachers and parents are opposed to each other. So we often do forget a lot of teachers actually are parents. But that said, can you tell us a little bit about what the strikers are demanding? What are some of the basic demands that you're asking for?
Yeah, so we're kind of fighting under a banner of safe and stable schools. And what that means is we need smaller class sizes. So we need caps. The district can say, okay, sure, we'll give you small class sizes. But unless we get something in the contract that says this is the cap, we know that can turn, like in some rooms, like 45. There's first grade classrooms with 35 students. And these are first graders who maybe only stepped in the building for the first time this year, right? They might have spent their entire kindergarten in learning online. So in addition to smaller class sizes, we're asking for mental health supports. Right now, the ratio to social workers to students is 1 to 1,000. You can imagine how effective that is. So we want ratios that more reflect the needs of what our students have. We want a competitive and livable wage for our education support professionals. Most folks are earning about $24,000 a year, which means many of them are working 2 and 3 jobs, right? Aren't able to make rent. And these are some of the folks that do, I would say, the hardest work in our buildings, right? They're the support staff who work with children with special needs, right? There are bilingual assistants who help interpret for families who speak multiple languages, right? And they're also the ones who were put back into buildings first before anyone was vaccinated and to work with kids, right? So these folks have historically and continue to dedicate themselves to the well-being of kids and are not treated with respect from the district or compensated in a way that they can even live off of. I mean, I feel like our demands, and I just feel like it's really important to we're not asking for anything that's outrageous, right? We're asking for class sizes that are manageable, mental health for students, and a living and dignified working conditions for the people who work with kids.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's such an important point because it's sort of like, if you stop anyone on the street, probably even a lot of these politicians, and just ask them, oh, should we have small class sizes? Yes. Should we support students with mental health? Yes. These type of things that almost everyone recognizes has to happen if we're going to have good public schools, which brings me to my next question because, I saw an amazing video of 2 of your officers giving an update on what was going on. But the thing that caught me, I sent it to a lot of my teacher friends, is as the video goes on, the number of people honking in support of the picket line just as it becomes more and more prominent, and it felt like every car by the end. So what kind of support are you all seeing from the community there in Minneapolis?
Yeah, it's on fire. I mean, the love is everywhere. Every morning we're at our sites and people are dropping us off more food and more donations than we even know what to do with. People are honking. I was out, I live 10 blocks from where I work. And so I took my son on a bike ride after one of the pickets, and I had 3 families who stopped me and they said, we will keep our kids home as long as it takes to get what students and staff deserve. I mean, I feel like it is unbelievable, the level of support. And Minneapolis has been through a lot, for the last couple of years, it is a city that has had to wrestle and continues to wrestle with a lot of deep issues around racial justice, around police violence. And in addition to all the inequities that were exacerbated by the pandemic, right? And in that, you see mutual aid systems set up all over the place, and folks are coming out and saying we are going to do whatever it takes to hold the line, whatever it takes.
Right,
and families and community members are helping us do that.
Great clip from Breakthrough
Well, it's
News.
certainly been fantastic to see. I mean, you've had a number of huge marches. Just massive marches through downtown Minneapolis. So if you could just talk a little bit about sort of the broader.
But we're always standing with strikers. Teaching strikers, of course. They want to be in there with their kids, but government's got to give them a little respect, right? Fuck's sakes. Can't get anything out of these fucking people for what we actually need, but they're really 1.2 billion to Ukraine in the first 30 days of support, something like that.
I'm going to experience a humiliating loss to a 13-year-old without lagging out.
So this one was from Jamal Thomas about Joe Biden's manufactured blue-collar background, about how Sleepy Joe is not actually one of the people from Scranton, PA. He's a fucking con man. I think we all know that, right? But I like Jamal, and he is on Radio Sputnik, which is having its own battles, so we're going to give him as much love as we can.
About Hunter Biden and items that have been taking place associated
Radio
with him,
Sputnik.
specifically around the issue of that laptop. We've had Miranda Devine on the show multiple times to discuss her book, Laptop from Hell, detailing issues associated with Hunter Biden, not just the balancing of the M&Ms, but also dealing with the financial obligations associated with either China or, for that matter, Ukraine.
How many M&Ms did he get? How many M&Ms did he get? Did they ever say?
That is a really good question. I am not entirely sure. I don't remember
Were they the
video.
regular M&Ms or the peanut M&Ms?
Peanut. I think it's peanut.
Oh, really?
I think it's the peanut ones.
The bigger ones.
Yeah,
Okay.
the bigger ones. Make it a little bit more challenging. That's what I keep telling you. It's a sport. But from the standpoint of the New York Times, if you remember, there was all sorts of, let's say, hysteria about this because the New York Post came out with the story about the Hunter Biden laptop within a month of the election. Well, of course, you had media who was open and honest and accepted the story with open arms. They didn't do any of that. In fact, it was the opposite. They went so far as to put it in Twitter jail to make sure that the story wouldn't show out. And then you had media repeating, Russian propaganda, Russian propaganda, Russian propaganda. That story was true. And the New York Times ends up coming up with it, maybe a week ago, basically saying, hey, this story's true. Hunter Biden paid off his taxes. And then buried in the article, you see, the federal investigators got their hands on the laptop, and they've been going through emails, which just so happen to be true. And then even talk about a dinner meeting that potentially took place between Biden and a Burisma executive, which is mind-blowing because Biden said, I never knew what my son was doing. I didn't know.
God.
I mean, I was viceroy of
really?
Ukraine, and he was just running an energy company, but we never talked about it, and we never met the family or anything like that.
I was also doing deals in China, but apparently, I was known as the big guy, but no big deal.
But no big deal. No big deal. No corruption there at all. To have a conversation about this and this story and a few elements of the story. I want to talk about this from a legal standpoint, a punditry standpoint, but also just a personal relationship standpoint with our guest, because our guest basically knew Hunter growing up. To have a conversation, we're joined with Tyler Nixon. Tyler Nixon is an Army infantry veteran, counselor at law, constitutionalist, advocate, writer, technologist, critical historian, and extremist in defense of liberty. Tyler, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning?
Good morning. Happy Monday. I've heard of peanut M&Ms, but penis M&Ms?
Yeah, they're a new brand. They're coming out.
How many can you balance, Tyler? I mean, before we hit him on this, I am
hoping you weren't going to ask that.
I was just curious. All men have done it. And the same way that Fern basically says all men basically had these pin-up posters, I think all men have tried this at least once.
Well, we've all played Twister, though. Right? Is that the game I'm
That's
thinking
the
of?
game is
That's it,
Twister. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Tyler. Twister.
I don't think that all men have done that.
No, I'm totally joking. I don't think anybody else has done that under normal circumstances. But from your standpoint, Tyler, you basically grew up with Hunter. That's kind of one of the reasons why I thought it'd be interesting to bring you on. We had the conversation once before about your upbringing and everything else, and you were able to kind of give this kind of insight that was, in one sense, empathetic, but in another sense, almost kind of nailing down why the empathy on some level is required because of the life that he was basically experiencing and this kind of drug addiction and everything else that was basically taking place. What's your take on this stuff? I mean, that's basically breaking with this story coming out from the New York Times. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the story here is become less. Well, it's still obviously Hunter Biden and the outrages, but I don't think anybody who was sane and rational doubted that this was authentic. I mean, please, honestly, what was coming out. No way this was fabricated by any intelligence service, even our own. The story really is just the complete deceit and lack of credibility of all these so-called dozens of former intelligence officers or officials or whatever have you, that all piled on and tried to sort of poo-poo this out of the news, and the suppression that went on in coordination with obviously social media, down to where, it was like proactively hunting down anyone who would even bring up the story and like censoring them. And like the case of the New York Post, I guess it was, they didn't just censor the content of the laptop story. They censored the entire paper, just everything, just deleted them off the, just shut them down entirely. So, that's really the larger story here. But it's one of these deals. To me, it came into town when the Clintons ooze made its way to Washington, where they can lie to your face. Everybody knows they're lying. They know everybody knows they're lying, and yet we're still supposed to swallow this, and the media just continues to run with this as though it's like a credible explanation for anything. And it's just, what we have now, this whole notion that this was fabricated by the Russians or anybody else. And Joe Biden citing this during the debate. And it comes back to just Donald Trump was right. I think Joe Biden's presidency is going to be basically a continuous string of Trump being shown to be either correct or right, or having been on the right track, or having done something better. It really is. It's just a new low, really. And this is before you even get the Hunter, the material on Hunter. I mean, I knew Hunter going back to probably grade school. And, look, I was never close to him. Like, I mean, we were friends. We socialized. We certainly shared enough, late night and other intimate moments.
You didn't ever share crack pipes
friends.
or anything?
Say again?
You didn't ever share crack pipes or anything?
No crack pipes. No. Not that I recall. No, of course not. No. But I mean, Hunter. I remember him coming in. Well, geez, but what the hell? It's all come out now. I mean, my God, I couldn't tell any stories.
I was going to say, we've heard it all.
Laptop. My God,
Mm-hmm.
It's like tame. We would congregate at Kelly's Logan House in Wilmington, which is like an Irish bar, sort of in Trolley Square, the kind of the young hip area, and see music. And last call in Delaware is always 1 a.m., which I felt was kind of early when you're in your 20s and partying. It's like DC. I think it's like 2:33. So we were like 1 a.m. Anyway, so we would usually just kind of there'd be a little after party typically. I just remember Hunter coming in one night, just sort of barging in. He would find out through our crew, the friends, whatever. And he came in and he was just, I don't know, he was already probably on a second or third day, just nonstop. And it was just like literally like, who's got it? Who's got it? Like, like practically frisking people. I'm like, don't touch me. It's just like, dude, this guy.
Who's got it? Meaning like
really,
cocaine,
really
crack, what?
Oh, yeah. No, cocaine, powder cocaine. Yeah. And some just people in that milieu, let's just say, definitely it was around, and it would be like, the late people would repair to whatever, the bathrooms. And, anyway, so my friends were partiers, but largely not into that kind of stuff. But if there was a late night going on, eventually somebody would show up with it. I mean, like Ashley Biden would be over at Jimmy Tygani's restaurant, Pan Thai, and they'd be chopping it out right on the bar, as far as the stories I've heard. And certainly it just went around. I mean, it was pretty prevalent that it was pretty well known that everybody but Bo in that family, let's just say among the kids, was definitely deep into the nose candy, and certainly like their share of partying. And again, this is obviously not. I'm not telling any secrets here, but I mean, he was just. I knew he was. I remember him telling me the story of a bender, and it was just the two of us. I think went over to a friend's house, who was like. They were supposed to. It was sort of between figuring out who was gonna have people over late night, and he was just going on and on about this story about his Las Vegas. I mean, this is back in like 2003 or 4, right? Maybe later than that, actually. Might be 6 or 7, but it was just this endless story of his like debauchery and degeneracy in Vegas, where he was, was like describing how he was bleary-eyed. Then I went and drank and for blah blah, and he's like, and then I checked into the hotel and I was, waking up in the gutter, and it was just this endless. And I thought, is there a punchline to this? It's like, no, it's just this endless binge that he was on. And I thought, my God, like I remember at the end of it, and he was very clear about the details. Like, I mean, it wasn't like he was just sort of making it up. He was going like minute by minute, practically, just all the craziness like that he would get into after 3 or 4 days up in Vegas. And then I guess it came out later that that there was an even longer version of it. I guess he would go back and it would become even more, extended and degenerate. And I just remember hearing it, thinking, man, like, how do you? I mean, I kept thinking, it's a wonder he's even alive at this point, because I mean, you can't drinking and drugging for days on end like that. I mean, I got to say, the guy's got an immense constitution, apparently, as far as like his ability to ingest drugs and not kill himself. Or he's certainly got some kind of guardian angel looking after him, or guardian devil, maybe as the case may be. But that being said, the stuff coming out, it's just, I don't think anymore. First of all, Joe Biden, I mean, they just lied outright to the country about the laptop, and everybody knew it was real. There's no way that this stuff could have been manufactured by anybody. It was just too authentic. And it was authenticated at the time. Tony Bobolinsky, his, the partner. And it's funny because when they said the big guy, I remember my brother calling Hunter, and it was about when I was basically arrested for, drugs for marijuana. Ironically, by them, they raided my office, and it was just ridiculous. It was a persecution by, the Biden crime junta in Delaware, which really was more about the people behind them than necessarily like Bo's attorney general. He ran for attorney general the first time in 2006, when I ran for state senate at the same time. And the whole thing was just a ridiculous. I don't know who was behind it, but anyway, it destroyed my career pretty much for years on end. But I remember my brother calling Hunter to be like, what the hell are you people doing? Like, why would you go after my brother, who was not anything close to what your family, like the cocaine freaks and whatever. And he said, first of all, I guess Hunter had just gone into rehab recently and was like, first of all, Tyler's got to admit he's got a problem. I'm like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me, for pot? Like, it was so bad. But he was referring to Bo as the other guy. He's like, I can't. He's like, first of all, I can't talk to the other guy about this. And I thought, as soon as I heard the big guy, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly the kind of language he used. I knew it was right. I knew it was true. I could just tell, he would refer, again, the other guy was his brother, the big guy was his father, and who knows how he would refer to anybody. But I mean, that was just basically the kind of language that they used. I mean, it was sort of, everybody was buddy. They was, hey buddy, like this. And it was, I always felt like there was sort of a condescension almost. I don't know how to describe it. It's like everybody was at arm's length. Okay. And I'll say this, what I found about the Bidens and learned over the years growing up is that they are political animals, and Joe is the ultimate political animal. I mean, he's just and I'm going to say political animal. I mean, almost inhuman in that sense, Well,
and that's one of the things that you always hear is like, it's Joe where, he takes the train every day, and, he was doing his thing where he almost stepped down from the Senate after his wife and daughter were killed, but he kept going, and he's this guy, who grew up with a stutter, and look where he came from. And it's like this whole like nice, beautiful, empathetic Joe, and it sounds like he's kind of an ass.
No, it's a totally manufactured narrative. Everything with them has always been about political appearances and how it impacts their or ultimately Joe's, quote, viability. And that's
hair-sniffing, creepy fucking asshole.
It was always about, oh my God, Bo can't be seen at this level.
Shut up, fat. Like, who says that shit? To an old fucking, no, man.
Ultimately going to take over Joe's seat, if not directly, certainly at some point. And everything was always manufactured and always about appearances and always about how it came across with, the mythical they, what they think. And, Joe ultimately, I think he's got a really serious inferiority complex. And as I would describe Joe Biden, as I have before, as someone who spent his life trying to disprove what he thinks other people think about him. And the problem with that is that what they think about him is true. He's a lightweight idiot. And frankly, an ambitious, overly ambitious, self-promoting braggart and opportunist. A blowhard. And it's so funny because he used to be the golden orator of the Democrat Party back in the the mid 80s, early 80s.
And he was
Joe Biden was inspiring. Of course, it was Robert Kennedy's words half the time.
Yeah.
But and then you hear today literally the opposite, where I hear Democrats on the Democrat side and even liberals saying, Biden's not much of an orator. I mean, he used to be considered the soaring, always evoking the Kennedys. I mean, he's I think someone referred to him, I forget what columnist as a fourth generation carbon copy of the Kennedys. And he would invoke their name and talk about, the assassination of our heroes doesn't mean that our dreams die and blah, blah, blah. And he was definitely funded in 72 by the Kennedy machine. So, I think he's always, they even take Thanksgiving every year up in Nantucket, I guess, or somewhere up in, up in Kennedy country in Massachusetts. And it's just, he is, like I said, political animal. There's no humanity to this man. There's no appeal to anything, everything.
Thinking about going solar? Before you do, see what others paid for 3 to 10 kilowatt systems in your area and what you should pay based on recent installation.
Everything comes down to his.
For the next segment, I am going to take my first look at Steven Crowder. Louder with Crowder. I've never watched Steven Crowder. One of my regulars on Twitch mentioned them, and I don't even know what the fuck side they're on, but what's going on here?
You're so stupid, they measure your IQ in Celsius.
Oh yeah? Well, you're so fat, you should probably work for BuzzFeed Boldly.
Yeah? Well, your mommy's such a floozy, she probably #shouted her abortion.
Oh yeah? Well, your dad's such a transy that he should probably work for Fox.
Hold on now, wait a minute. Now, don't bring nobody's transgender father into this. Z ain't here. Now remember, if it weren't for your transgender father, you wouldn't be here. So, remember kids, if you make fun of one tranny, you're making fun of all trannies all around the world.
The fuck is this?
Treat you right, treat father, mother right. Treat you right, treat you right. Treat you right, treat father, mother right. Treat you right, treat you right.
Father, mother, there is no other. Like father, mother, so treat thee right. Father, mother, there is no other. Like father, mother, so treat thee right. Father, mother, I'll always love her. My father, mother, so treat thee right, treat thee right. T is for the transition father, mother did, making me proud, I'm his or her kid. R is for respect, you better show the miss. It don't matter a lick, she used to have a dick. A is for the anger and pains and aches that Z went through to have his hormones replaced. N is for the new vaginas he has. Use the proper pronouns or see you'll smack your ass. Another in here is for neutral bathrooms that father mother needs when she drops a deuce. The last letter Y is that you better show respect. It's incredibly painful trying to change your sex. Father mother, there is no other like father mother. So treat thee right. Father mother, I'll always love her. My father mother. So treat thee right, treat thee right.
Treat thee right, treat father, mother right. Treat thee right, treat thee right. Treat thee right, treat father, mother right. Treat thee right, treat thee right.
Seriously, what the fuck is going on right now?
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am. You need to settle down, mind your business, okay? Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I am so confused what's happening right now. Why did somebody mention this? It's so interesting that these are such niche things. Like, I've probably heard the name before, but I've never seen this person. And I've seen probably clips, but just not even fucking put it together. So,
oh, that is delicious. Ooh.
Here's my first time.
Wonderful. So it's a new, I got a new tea. You know, I just recently got back into the tea because, and this is true, the reason I stopped was because of how aggressive
I'm not going to be
they were at
nice,
the
but
mall
you be
from
nice
Savant.
to me, I guess.
It was like carnival barkers. It's like
Be
a
rude,
third world
whatever.
country. We're
Let's
going
see
to
what
haggle with
happens.
you. I guess they shut down a while ago. So the point is, I shouldn't let other people affect my emotions that much.
I've also been teabagged at the mall.
Yeah, well, look, we're going to be talking about that Don't Say Gay bill in just a little bit. And Mark Hamill. So before we get to anything else, look, today we are going to be talking not only about Russia, Ukraine, but of course about the media reaction here. Surprise, I don't know if you know this, Trevor Noah and Joy Reid think that you are racist if you care about our Ukrainian friends. And we're also going to be talking about how this affects you when these new sanctions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also the idea of the United States dollar being used as a reserve currency. There are a lot of elements here that maybe people aren't really taking into account. We're not just World War III doesn't necessarily look like World War I and II. Especially when you have international governments who are beholden to each other and linked. You know, this whole "we are the world" thing kind of backfires when you're only as strong as your asshole-ish link.
It's true.
So speaking of which, and after that intro, if you miss us here on YouTube, and we haven't told you that we're not doing a show on YouTube, it's Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can watch us on Rumble. Nothing would make me happier than YouTube to crumble under the weight of the Rumble overlords and, of course, Mug Club, loudwithcrowder.com/Mug Club. $99 for students, $99 or $69 for students, veterans, active military. We're going to do another hour of the show.
Yeah.
What's going on there, Tim the Toolman? Are you okay?
I don't have overlays, so...
oh, geez.
Bring them in.
Yeah,
well,
bring them in.
if we don't have them in, you guys all know references are all available at loudwithcrowder.com.
We'll get them. We'll get them in 2 minutes.
And my question of the day before I bring our friends in, how much longer can Joy Reid remain employed while her go-to is calling everything racist?
Other than herself.
It's sort of like how long could Ronda Rousey be champion, once people figured out the armbar?
Yeah, but that was it.
Yeah. Well, she had like a bunch of setups. Jody doesn't even have more setups. She just goes straight to "you're racist," and I don't even say, well, okay, well, we've already done that. So I don't know. But again, no one really watches her. All right, before we move on to that, Gerald Day, how are you?
I am well, sir. How are you?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I got some sleep.
What?
Yeah, I got for me, I can operate on 6 hours. I'm like Elon Musk.
Well, let me just so you know, tonight if you sleep, a clown will eat you.
Yeah.
So you're gonna go to bed thinking that now?
No, that's why I have a guard at my door. I have like one of those door stops.
Yeah, it's not gonna help.
Yeah. Well, I figured it helps that I'm not 6. So I'm in a less at-risk category.
There you go.
That's the problem with being a 6-year-old. You're at very little risk for COVID. Mm-hmm. Huge risk for clown rape.
Yeah.
The good Lord giveth, the good Lord taketh away, and you hear him, you see him, you know him, you love him. You can follow him on Twitter at Landau Dave. Dave Landau, how are you?
Ahoy, good. How about you?
Well, I'm okay, but we're going to get into Stephen Colbert here.
Oh, cool.
And I know you're not a fan.
No, huge fan.
Oh.
I saw him read a poetry at Carnegie Hall against Trump. It was great.
Yes.
Slam poetry, or?
It was the worst thing I've ever seen, Gerald.
You ever been to an open mic night and see someone go up and do slam poetry?
Now imagine.
I leave.
It's sort of the burlesque dancer of the comedy world. Like the burlesque dancers are strippers who couldn't make the cut. Yeah. Slam poets are comedians who couldn't make the cut.
Yes, it was. I went to see Nathaniel Rateliff and Jason Isbell, lead singer and the lead singer of the Black Crowes, and out came Stephen Colbert to do a poem called "The Mockingbird."
Oh, I don't know if you can see Dave there. You pick up the names he dropped. So
no, I didn't meet them. I paid a ticket to see them.
Was it weird at them?
But if I did have that, I wouldn't drop them all the time. I'd be like, "Hey guys, you know who I've met?" But yeah, he came out and did a poem called "The Mockingbird" about Trump.
Oh yeah,
and it was for a thing to free Tibet or whatever crap. I'm not sure where Tibet stands, but something about Tibet. And
afterward, they immediately banned him.
Every liberal in Carnegie Hall was like, Like everyone was uncomfortable with what he did.
I agree with what he said. That was terrible.
Fuck
No, it wasn't.
That
I
is
agree
a
with anything.
dumbass.
No,
You wrote a poem.
The liberals.
Two people are like, I should have gone to the deli. That's right. You went to the hall.
I think Joy Reid should get into wrestling now that we know she can take a fall.
Yes.
But only male wrestling.
Yeah. Well, it's a gender bender with wrestling. We don't know anymore.
Yeah, we don't know.
So this is something that Stephen Colbert said either yesterday or the day before, depending on when you're watching this, or depending on my timeline. I believe it was the night before last.
Yeah. One of those things.
I'm just trying to soften the blow here. It's a psychological term, right? They use it like front loading.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. And if you work to support a family, you're probably not going to be thrilled. And by that, I mean you're going to want to punch a hole through the entire world. Here's Stephen Colbert letting you know just how virtuous he is in paying higher gas prices.
Since the invasion, oil prices have skyrocketed. Today, the average gas price in America hit an all-time record high of over $4 per gallon. Okay, that stings, but a clean conscience is worth $1 or $2. I'm willing to pay.
Applause sign.
Yeah.
This is from a while ago.
It's important.
I
I'm willing
picked
to
it
pay $4
because
a
I
gallon.
thought
Hell, I'll
I
pay
agree with him on
$15 a
some
gallon.
stuff.
Wrong. Because I drive a Tesla.
It's not starting out right.
Now, I mean, the term tone deaf is thrown around quite a bit, but he just said to an audience of largely middle-class
March
people
9th.
who were sitting out in the freezing cold waiting to get into that studio that, I'll pay $15 a gallon because I drive something you can't afford.
Right. I make $16 million a year. Is that what you said earlier?
It's between 15 and 16, which just makes me mad.
Yeah, don't worry. It's disgusting. But also, they're clapping because there's a sign that tells them to, because no one on earth agrees with that.
Yes, yeah. That's the only sign people respect anymore, I guess. That and the no smoking sign on airplanes.
He mad because he's jealous because he's got 6 million. He's got 5.6 million subscribers, and his videos get 600 to 700,000 views. So each one of his videos makes him like, I don't know, $5,000 per video. So what is he talking about? Every day he drops a video, his little team there gets $5,000 put in their pockets. That's without the promotional. That's just on YouTube. That's not the 17 other platforms he's on. What the fuck's he talking about, man? He's a millionaire too. Just jealous, I guess. And I don't like Stephen Colbert. He used to do good, okay stuff, but he's been a sellout. So, yeah. I kind of agree with him, but at the same time, he's a dick for the way I don't like the way he's going about things so far.
Yeah, I wonder what his jet takes.
Yeah, exactly.
He has a Tesla jet, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. No, he said, I'm willing to pay. By the way, how's your Tesla powered? Not only is he's in New York.
Is it powered with the smell of his own farts?
Yeah.
I bet he'd love that.
He would, yeah. Well, the problem is he wouldn't power his Tesla because he'd use all the fuel.
Yeah, that's true. He's like, I keep huffing it.
It's your own brand.
Oh, I'm the best.
Well, this took a
How are you going to power it? Also, think about this. People don't really. We are light years away from being. If everyone switched to Teslas tomorrow, and I think Teslas are cool cars. I like Teslas. They're made here in America. I love Teslas. I did a whole segment with Hodge Twins on Tesla where I said my mind was changed. I was wrong about Teslas. Okay, I want to be clear about that. But if everyone switched to Teslas or electric cars tomorrow, our power grid couldn't handle it.
Well, the owner of Tesla doesn't agree with him.
Right.
The guy who makes the stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You mean the evil oil baron from Fern Gully, Elon Musk?
Yeah, the terrible man who invented not invented, but perfected the electric
Perfected
car.
the electric
and
car.
everybody hated him for it.
Yeah, and then, of course, they chastised him for smoking a joint on Joe Rogan's show. It's like,
Yeah.
hold on a second, you're pro-pot and you're pro-electric car, and now you're vilifying this guy. This guy who perfected the electric car had to leave California for Texas.
Yeah, well, I think the problem was he got rich. That's the issue.
Is that
Oh,
the
he was
problem?
successful. Now we hate him even though he does everything we like.
I was enjoying a joint with the one guy that everyone smokes a joint with. This
Right.
is horrible.
Yes. I mean, that guy smokes joints like Parliament, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, why would they hit a joint?
That's the least problematic thing that he puts in his body.
Joe Rogan smokes so much weed, Willie Nelson would say, I have to go home now, Joe.
That guy hit a joint and was like, you know what? I'm going to space.
Yes.
That's incredible.
By the way, here's a flamethrowers. Play around with it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Good Lord. Colbert, though, is just completely out of touch, and the fact that any of his audience would agree with this is absurd.
Well, here's the thing. He's saying the quiet part out loud. Just so you know, this is a guy who gets on calls with people in this administration. This is the guy who advertised for vaccines, right? Moderna. This was a glorified ad cloaked as a sketch. And I know that because we do glorified ads cloaked as sketches. That being said, there isn't the same. We're not getting them from Big Pharma, from Built Bar, from, Walther.
The dancing gas cans just lost their job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
No, we need dancing Colbert farts.
It's just batteries.
But so much money. So his salary is more than the budget for. This includes rent, utilities, salaries for everyone. Yours truly, and he still gets half the viewers in the demographic that we do.
Yeah. Well, and he also said something that not a lot of people resonated with. Like, I'll pay a couple of extra dollars to have a clean conscience. I'm like, oh, really? For gas? Do you understand what gas does to the rest of the prices in the market for the people who can't afford to pay more for food and for shelter and for insurance? All of that stuff starts to creep up. It starts to increase with inflation.
Not to mention your clean conscience doesn't really mean anything when it would exist if you filled up your tank with dead babies.
Right.
Ouch.
No, it's true.
No, my conscience is clean. Hey, what's your stance on abortion up until birth and including shut up?
Well, up until $14, apparently.
Yeah, I guess.
Can we do a trial period to see if you want to keep them?
That's where he stops, though, and I wonder why.
Can we do a trial period for late night hosts?
Oh,
and believe me, it's not. Look, this is less people say.
They did it to Conan.
Right, they did it to
We
Conan.
should still have it.
Now, they rightfully did it to Lily Singh.
Well.
Legitimately picked a fucking clip that I thought I could agree with him on some shit. Picked a clip that I thought I would agree with you. I'm going to agree with you on a lot of stuff here. This is going to be an easy clip for me to go back and forth with, and he's just a dick. Ignorant dick? I don't know, just a dick. This is not going to work. This isn't working well. I gotta... I don't want to keep going with this person. I always try to give them, I try to give them like a half hour for a new person that I've never watched before. I am not loving this. All right, where am I at? 3 hours and 20 minutes streaming. Let's do 2 more minutes of this garbage. See if I can handle it. That seems fair. Right? What will that put me at?
This is the whitest guy on television, so I'm not protecting my ilk. Just to be clear, he sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally anti-white when it comes to Stephen Colbert.
Yes.
I don't think he
He's
should have that.
incredibly white.
Please replace him with any black person you can find.
As a matter of fact, if you were to replace him with a black comedian doing the white guy voice, if I were to listen to it on audio, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Right.
Yeah. I want to replace him with Sinbad.
Yeah. Sinbad doing the white voice. Think about it. I'm fine paying an extra $1 or $2 per gallon. What?
What would you say?
What'd you say? I'd be fine paying 15 because I drive a Tesla. You really just... You haven't had your ass kicked in a long time, have you?
I say get Chevy Chase or Bill Cosby.
Yes.
One or the other.
Yeah.
The worst host of late night and just a guy who's not very good.
All right. Let's move on here now to someone else who is on television. Because that's a thing.
That's a qualification.
By the way, is Brian Stelter still employed? I don't know. He thinks he's going to be fired because CNN wants to apparently do news. He's like, I'm going to lose everything.
I hope.
I'm 36.
I want to do the Pelosi.
Okay. Chains his seatless bike up outside of CNN.
I don't want him to steal the seat.
That's why I don't have one.
That's where I meet Don Lemon to fight. By the bike racks. You bitch. That was my spot.
Stealing all the good men. I mean women.
Yes.
I know you took my banana seat.
I saw you making eyes at Cuomo. He's mine, damn it. So, of course, Joy Reid echoed something that Trevor Noah said earlier this week. And spoiler alert, Ukraine, Russia, really not the issue. It's not the global economic policy. It's not the fallout. It's not the potential for World War III. It's not the instability. It's not about us fighting wars in which we have no actual vested interest or potentially joining in. We're basically fighting a war. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
We just haven't dropped bombs yet. No. All of this, according to Joy Reid and Trevor Noah, is about racism, which brings us to this week, insane in the Ukraine.
I want to see the clip, but I don't either. They're just driving me nuts and pissing me off, so... I'm not. Let's not. I fucking completely forgot my Stony Progressive takedown. I had so many fucking clips to get to. We've almost been here for 3.5 hours, so let's do the fucking Stony Progressive takedown. Get my voice lubed up and get through this shit. Stony Progressive takedown of Chucky the fucking Schumer, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing this. Charles E. Schumer. He's not worth much money, guys. Lifetime politician. He's only worth $1.1 million, which a little bit of money in the Morgan Stanley, a little bit of money in the credit unions, not a lot of money. He's just an average Joe, just an average, only a millionaire. Poor guy. We should feel sorry for him. Chucky the Shoe. Only a millionaire. Now, of course, to me, this is a big fucking red flag because there's no way that he's only a millionaire. There's absolutely zero fucking possibility. I don't believe it for a second. With his long ass career, a little hard to say what, he maybe has done in his whole career. But for his campaign financing for this last election cycle, his top 5 donors throw up a few red flags. How does that look? Got that there? So, very first one, Nextra Energy. Chucky the Schumer, his main contributor was Nextra Energy. What's Nextra Energy? That's a very good question. Nextra Energy is one of the largest capital investors in infrastructure, with between 50 and 55 billion in infrastructure investments. These are mostly green, but also just general infrastructure construction bids, contracts. 50 to 55 billion company that Chucky the Shoe is their top investor. Blackstone Group is the number 3. Blackstone Group, one of the 2 companies that own everything and are not a good company. They're not good for anybody. They're not good for anything. And if you're their number 3 investor into Chucky the Shoe, that is not good for me, and that is not good for you. All right. Alphabet Inc. Number 4, Alphabet Inc. Bow, bow, bow. Google, fuck yourself. Yeah, that's not a good front line right there. Chucky the Shoe, $27 million this election cycle. You keep going, you got BlackRock Inc., you got Microsoft, you got American Express, United Health Group, Lockheed Martin, Cisco Systems, just corporate-owned stooge, Chucky the Shoe. Now, when I looked under Ballotpedia for, his election, he is a mostly guaranteed to almost positive success. That's really, why do I have to do this? Seriously, guys, how do people go, yeah, Chuck Schumer's my guy, and I can't believe I would have to ever vote for anybody else. So I'm not going to look at this like, if they think it's going to be Democrat, let's just assume it's going to be Democrat. Why not primary him? So let's take a look at the 2 primary candidates. These are the 2 people going against Chucky the Shoe, and see if maybe somebody looks a little better. I don't know. I haven't even looked, honestly. I did this last minute before I started it, and I almost fucking forgot about it. So let's take a look at the 2 people trying to primary Chucky the Shoe. Magulsi for U.S. Senate. This is like his channel, or like he chose to do this. He put this together.
Watch your back. Sir.
Yes, please.
Why are you running?
I am running for U.S. Senate.
I've seen you doing push-ups and lifting weights earlier. What was that about?
Yes, a man like me with no name to take on a powerful establishment like Chuck Schumer, I need mental strength and I need physical strength as well. That's why I was doing those exercises to give me the energy to keep going. Chuck Schumer is a man with millions of dollars. He has most corporations in his pocket. So you can imagine somebody to run against him, it has to be a big challenge, and that person must be mentally strong and physically strong.
Okay, have you ran for office before?
No, I've never ran for office before, but I've volunteered on some people's campaigns. For instance, Obama's time of running, I was among those who went around giving out campaign literature. My background is in finance. I spent many years auditing Medicaid programs. As a Medicaid auditor, I had the opportunity to go to so many parts of New York State, auditing hospitals, nursing homes, and other providers to make sure they use the Medicaid funds as per the regulations. Then finally, I worked as a financial regulator, regulating financial institutions. As a financial regulator, I had an opportunity to go to so many different states in this country. I've been to different states around the nation, and that gave me a fair understanding of what this nation is all about. It also I came to realize that there are two Americas. You have the America for the rich, where the upper class keeps getting and getting and getting, while the other America is the working class, the struggling families. Those ones have been forgotten completely. They keep struggling and struggling. It never ends. You wonder, USA, the richest country on earth, we have people who struggle every single day. I think we can do better. This is our opportunity to do things drastically different, to bring relief. We have people who have been in Washington for decades. Decades they are in Washington. What are they doing? Handing the keys to our economy to China, handing the keys to our national security to China. They just sit back and relax. Well, corporations, factories are closing their doors, shipping jobs overseas. What are they leaving us with here? Poverty and starvation wages. We can do better. If people trust me, they give me their votes, I'll make a difference. With the everyday people, this is our opportunity to make a difference.
All right, what's your name?
My name is Moses Mugurus, a Democrat, a progressive Democrat. Platform. Platform.
What platform are you looking to do with?
Okay, yeah, so my platform is on...
So his camera guy doesn't even know the questions he's supposed to be fake asking him. It's funny. He's like, platform. You're supposed to ask me the platform next. Alright, that was funny shit. Do a second take, man. You're fucking doing this for your fucking Senate fucking race. Do a second take, dude. But I already prefer him to Chucky the Shoe, so that's something, right? And like I said, just if you know anybody in New York State, fucking throw this name at him. Let's check out the other person. Again, another person running for Senate. This is a 1-minute clip, a lot quicker.
Khaled for U.S. Senate in New York. Khaled has plans for free university education for American students. Khaled has plans to present Congress with a $0 budget from the government to support this plan. Establish a home loan program for middle-class single parents with no penalty for credit history. Free medical insurance for American people. Reduce the New York State sales tax for 6 years until the state recovers from COVID-19 economic hardship. Freeing U.S. citizens who are allegedly detained abroad. A reduction in U.S. military activity and presence in the Middle East. A policy that requires these regions pay for American military. Laws and procedures to reduce domestic violence nationwide. Law to stop personal attacks between candidates.
I didn't want to see that again. That was a little odd. It's a very weird way. I'm guessing that person thought that would be a good way to get all their policies across, which kind of looks that way up front, but it's for the average person. I don't think that's what they want. And most commercials, you wanted to give like 3 to 4 policies at most, because that's as much as people are going to actually take in. And anything beyond that, you're just kind of wearing them away. You need to like go slower with it. I don't know. And I didn't love the policies 100%. I would definitely go with the immigrant over this guy. But you didn't even hear him speak, so I have no concept. Maybe he's also an immigrant going against Chucky the Shoe, which I'm fine with. Fucking Chuck Schumer sucks. So anybody, please go against this person. Fuck you, Chucky the Shoe. Can't stand that guy. All right. Well, still killing it here. I am. That was so freaking weird. I thought that was going to go a lot longer. I did not stick with Steven Crowder as long as I had planned on. And I don't want to go to him again. Alright, well, let's just finish with a quick little Tulsi clip, and I'm going to call it a night. I've been on here for over 3 hours. And I got a whole lot more to get to, but I'm going to do an after stream. Yep, I'm already losing it. I'm going to do an afternoon stream tomorrow. And I'm going to still do after midnight one, my Weed Wednesday after midnight, tomorrow night, Eastern Standard Time, a little bit after midnight. And I'll have some stuff on medical. I'll have some stuff on, I don't know, some sort of medical marijuana, some sort of voting stuff. And we'll do some more comedy clips and stuff like that. But I will finish up the news side of things tomorrow afternoon. And, but let's finish off with the Tulsi clip. Since I put it in my fucking YouTube description.
I was making my way through the Capitol, kind of trying to figure out where I had to go and which halls to take, and I asked Capitol Security, Capitol Police, like, hey, can you point me in the right direction? I'm trying to figure out where I'm going. And she's like, yeah, I'll just walk you down. And I'm going that way. And I was, all right, cool. So we started talking, and I was like, man, there's like 90 new members of Congress here. We must be driving you crazy. She's like, you know what? We don't mind you guys right now. In 3 months, half of you won't even say hello to us when you walk in the door because you're going to feel like you're too important. And these things kind of set the tone for me from the beginning of recognizing people who go there and kind of feel like they shine in the so-called glory of being a member of Congress and unfortunately forget who they actually work for, that the people who voted for us and who sent us there, those are the people that we are accountable to. Those are the people who we should be thinking of at every minute of every day that we are on that job.
1, 2, 3.
Hell yeah. That is for tomorrow. And I am done for the night, guys. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for checking out Stony Progressive. Again, for the 85% of people that check it out later, please come and hang out at the live stream so we can have some conversations, some debates, some Discord. But as for now, I'll see you sometime after midnight. If you're still on, check me out tomorrow after lunch, about 12, I don't know, sometime between 12 and 1 Eastern. I'm going to wrap up the rest of the backup. And then again, after midnight, if you're one of my late night crewers, after midnight we'll be doing our Weed Wednesday. And I think I got 2 more states to go over. So I'll do research on those 2 states, and then we'll see what else we can dig up. But thanks for joining me. I got to get some food and walk the dog. So peace out. Take care. And we'll stay woke, stay vigilant. Keep your head up. Don't put your head in the sand, and stay stony and figure some shit out. Peace.